Welcome, daring souls, to the heartlands of Iowa State, known for endless cornfields, quiet farm roads, and weathered barns that have stood for generations. But behind the rustic charm lies a darker reality. Barns where unseen forces linger, where shadows move on their own, and where history refuses to rest. Barns are meant to shelter livestock, store crops, and provide safety for farmers. Yet across Iowa, many are haunted by tragedies, mysterious deaths, and restless spirits. Visitors report strange lights flickering inside empty stalls, footsteps echoing through silent rafters, and whispers carried on the wind even when no one else is near. Tonight, we explore 25 haunted barns in Iowa, filled with unseen forces, from abandoned farmsteads to historic structures, each with chilling encounters and ghostly legends. Some experiences are documented, some whispered in hushed tones, but all share one terrifying truth. In these barns, the past is never truly gone. Keep your lantern close, your senses alert, and step carefully, because tonight, the unseen is watching. Cedar Grove Barn stands quietly on the outskirts of Cedar Rapids, its red paint long faded to a dull, weathered hue, and its wooden beams warped by time and memory. To anyone passing by, it looks like any other aging structure left behind by a slower, simpler era. But those who know the stories say the air around it carries a certain heaviness, a silence, too deliberate, as though the land itself remembers what happened there. More than a century ago, Cedar Grove Barn was the pride of a hard-working farmer named William Harlan. Locals remembered him as a kind but solitary man who tended his animals with care and treated his land as something sacred. He built the barn himself, beam by beam, with his own hands and the help of a few neighbors. Inside, he stored not just hay and tools, but memories, wedding gatherings, family photos, and long evenings spent listening to the rain drum on the roof. It was his sanctuary, his life's work, and, according to local legend, the place where his spirit still lingers. The tragedy that turned the barn into a place of whispers occurred in the early 1900s. One late autumn night, when the wind howled through the fields, a fire broke out in the loft. Some said it was lightning. Others whispered it was sabotage, the result of a long simmering feud with another farmer. What's certain is that by the time neighbors arrived, the barn was engulfed in flames. Harlan's animals cried out in terror, their sounds echoing through the smoke. And in his desperate attempt to free them, William never came back out. When the fire finally burned itself down to embers, all that remained were blackened beams and a terrible silence. For decades after, the barn lay in ruin. Locals avoided the property, claiming to hear cries on the wind at night. The land eventually passed through different owners, some who tried to restore it and others who left it to decay. But every attempt to bring life back to Cedar Grove seemed to end in unease. Tools went missing, lanterns flickered without cause, and animals refused to go near the stalls where the fire had burned hottest. One of the first modern accounts of something strange came in the 1970s. A young couple who had recently moved to the area bought the property, enchanted by its rustic beauty. They planned to turn the barn into a venue for weddings and events. During the renovation, workers began to notice odd occurrences: nails vanishing from sealed boxes, the sound of footsteps pacing the loft when no one was upstairs, and a distinct, sharp smell of smoke that drifted through the air, even on windless days. One night, the foreman swore he saw a figure standing in the hayloft, a man in old work clothes, illuminated briefly by a flicker of light before vanishing entirely. He quit the next morning, refusing to return. The couple managed to complete the restoration, and for a time, the barn hosted small gatherings. But guests often commented on the uneasy atmosphere. Some claimed the lights would dim or pulse during slow songs, while others reported seeing a figure move behind the loft window when no one was supposed to be up there. The most chilling account came from a bride who fainted mid-ceremony, later telling her friends she'd seen a man standing behind her in the reflection of a decorative mirror, his face burned and blurred by smoke. After that event, the couple shuttered the barn permanently, unable to bear the growing sense of dread that seemed to hang over the place. Today, Cedar Grove Barn is once again quiet and empty. The doors are chained, but locals still wander near it, drawn by curiosity and fear. Teenagers tell stories of the burned farmer who roams the grounds, his lantern swinging in the dark. Some claim that if you visit on a cold October night, you'll see faint orange light flickering through the cracks in the boards, as though the fire never truly died out. A few paranormal investigators have ventured inside, often with mixed results. One team from Des Moines brought cameras and audio recorders, determined to capture something definitive. They reported strange temperature drops, sudden gusts of wind, despite sealed windows, and the smell of burning hay that would appear and vanish within seconds. The most unsettling discovery came from one investigator who wandered into the loft alone. She later described hearing a man's voice whisper directly behind her just one word, "Help." When she turned, there was no one there. Her recording equipment picked up nothing but static, though the faint crackling sound of fire could be heard beneath it. Skeptics, of course, offer more rational explanations. They say the barn's wooden structure traps air currents, causing the flickering lights and temperature changes. The scent of smoke, they argue, could linger in the wood, a residue from the original fire. But even those who dismiss the ghost stories admit there's something unusual about the atmosphere there. The air feels charged, as though waiting for something unseen to happen. Locals who lived near Cedar Grove for generations tend to speak of the place with quiet respect. Some leave small offerings, coins, wheat stalks, or candles on the old fence post near the gate, saying it's to keep the farmer calm. Others believe his spirit stays not out of anger, but of duty, still tending to the land he loved, guarding it from neglect. On certain nights, when the wind blows just right, travelers along the old county road say they can see a dim glow near the barn. It isn't the harsh glare of headlights or the flash of lightning, but something softer like the pulse of a lantern moving slowly through the fields. Those who've seen it often speak of an overwhelming sadness that follows, a feeling of loss that lingers even after they've driven away. Whether William Harlan's spirit truly roams Cedar Grove barn or not, his story remains stitched into the fabric of the land. The faint smell of smoke, the creaking boards, the shadows that seem to shift on their own all serve as reminders that tragedy leaves more than ashes behind. In the quiet heart of Cedar Rapids, the barn stands as both monument and mystery, a place where the past refuses to be forgotten, and where, perhaps, a lonely farmer still walks the stalls, tending to the ghosts of his memory. Maple Hollow Barn sits quietly on the edge of Des Moines, surrounded by rolling fields and the scent of old earth. Its weathered red boards have faded to shades of gray, and the roof sags gently under the weight of 100 winters. To passersby, it might look like nothing more than an abandoned piece of farmland, but those who live nearby know better. They speak of laughter that rings out when no one is there, the sound of small footsteps across the wooden floors, and strange pockets of cold that linger even on the warmest summer nights. The legend of Maple Hollow Barn began nearly a century ago. In the early 1900s, the property was owned by the Colburn family, who ran a small dairy farm on the outskirts of town. It was a simple, happy life. The barn was the center of everything, where the cows were milked, where hay was stacked high into the rafters, and where the Colburn children spent their afternoons playing hide and seek while their parents worked below. Locals remembered the laughter that used to pour out of those walls, echoing across the valley like music. But in 1926, tragedy struck. According to town records and surviving family accounts, a fire broke out late one evening. The cause was never fully determined. Some said it was a lantern left burning. Others believed lightning had struck the roof during a passing storm. Whatever the cause, the flames spread fast. The barn became an inferno of dried timber and hay. The Colburn parents tried desperately to get their children to safety, but in the chaos, two of them, Samuel, aged 8, and his younger sister Mary, only 6, were trapped in the hayloft. By the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. The barn collapsed inward, and the children were never seen alive again. The town mourned deeply. The Colburns eventually left the farm, unable to bear the memories. The property changed hands several times over the following decades, but no one stayed for long. People spoke of strange things happening after dark, of voices in the wind, of laughter that drifted through the trees. For years, Maple Hollow Barn stood empty, a silent monument to what had been lost. In the 1950s, a new family, the Harrisons, tried to revive the land. They repaired the barn and brought livestock back, hoping to put the past to rest. But their workers complained almost immediately. One man claimed he heard children giggling behind him while working in the stalls. Another said he saw small handprints appear in the dust of the loft floor, even though no one had been up there. The temperature would drop without warning, leaving their breath visible in the air despite the summer heat. When one of their horses refused to enter the barn entirely, snorting and backing away in fear, the Harrisons began to realize the stories might be more than just small-town legend. By the 1970s, Maple Hollow Barn had become a popular spot for local teenagers looking for a thrill. They would sneak inside at night with flashlights and dare each other to call out the names of the lost Colburn children. Many came out pale and shaken, claiming to have heard laughter or to have felt someone tug at their clothes. One group even reported seeing two faint, glowing shapes near the hayloft, latter one taller, one smaller, standing hand in hand before fading away like mist. Paranormal investigators began to take an interest in the site in the following decades. A team from Iowa State University's Paranormal Research Group visited in the late 1990s with thermal cameras and recording devices. What they captured remains unexplained. Distinct cold spots around the loft, far below the outside temperature, and faint recordings of what sounded like giggling, soft, childlike, and distant. When one investigator asked aloud, "Are you still here?" a quiet voice responded on playback, almost like a whisper, "Play with us." Skeptics argue there are logical explanations for everything that happens inside Maple Hollow Barn. They claim that old wood creaks and settles, creating strange echoes that mimic voices. The temperature shifts, they say, come from air currents trapped in the structure's uneven insulation. And as for the laughter, some believe it's just the sound of birds nesting in the rafters. Yet even the most rational visitors admit that something about the barn feels wrong, as if time stands still inside it. Local folklore has turned the Colburn children into gentle spirits, ghosts who never left their favorite place. People who visit respectfully often say the energy there feels sad, but not threatening. Some have left small toys or flowers on the old wooden steps leading up to the loft, and swear that when they return, the items have been moved. Others say that if you enter the barn in the late afternoon, just as the sun begins to set, you can hear faint giggles coming from above, like children playing hide and seek. One of the most chilling modern encounters came from a photographer who visited the barn in 2011. She was documenting abandoned rural buildings and spent nearly an hour taking pictures in and around the structure. When she reviewed her photos later, she found something she couldn't explain. In one image of the hayloft, a small figure stood near the back wall, a child in old-fashioned clothing, barely visible through the dust and light. The figure's head was tilted, and faintly, beside it, another smaller shape appeared to be holding its hand. Today, the property remains closed to the public. The current owners rarely speak about the barn, though they allow paranormal groups to investigate from time to time. Those who've gone inside describe the same sensations over and over again: sudden drops in temperature, soft laughter echoing through the beams, and a powerful feeling of nostalgia and sorrow intertwined. On quiet nights, neighbors still report hearing faint voices carried on the wind, drifting out from the direction of Maple Hollow. They say it sounds like children playing, innocent, joyful, unaware of the years that have passed. Some believe their spirits are simply reliving their happiest memories, still playing among the beams and bales where they once felt safe. Others think they are reaching out, hoping someone will finally notice them, finally say their names aloud again. Blackwood Barn stands on a lonely stretch of road outside Davenport. Its once proud red siding now turned a dull brown, and its roof sagging under the weight of time. The fields around it have long since gone wild, reclaiming what was once farmland. To the casual eye, it's just another relic of Iowa's rural past, but to locals, it's a place of unease, a building where echoes of tragedy refuse to fade. Those who dare to visit after sunset speak of shadowy figures moving between the beams, sharp metallic bangs from nowhere, and voices whispering just beyond hearing. The story of Blackwood Barn begins in the late 1800s, when it was built by a man named Henry Blackwood, a proud and hard-working farmer. Henry had come to Davenport from Illinois in search of new land and a fresh start. The barn was his pride, a large, sturdy structure meant to house horses, tools, and the many hands he employed to work the growing farm. But what began as a symbol of prosperity slowly became a place marked by misfortune. The first tragedy came only a few years after the barn's completion. A young farmhand named Thomas was working in the hayloft when the rope pulley he used to lift bales suddenly snapped. He fell nearly 20 feet, striking the hard-packed earth below. He died instantly. Henry buried him near the tree line and carried on. But the men whispered among themselves that something about the barn felt cursed. Years later, during a stormy night, another worker met his end. This time, it was Samuel, who had been trying to secure the barn doors against a rising wind. A bolt of lightning struck the metal latch he was holding, killing him on the spot. The flash lit up the whole valley, and those nearby swore they saw the barn shimmer with an eerie glow before plunging back into darkness. From that night on, strange things began to happen inside the building. Tools went missing, doors swung open on calm days, and the animals refused to enter after dusk. As time went on, more accidents followed. One worker crushed beneath a toppled hayrack. Another found lifeless near the grain chute with no clear cause of death. None of the deaths could be fully explained, but all of them seemed to happen in or around the barn. By the 1920s, people in Davenport had taken to calling it the Blackwood Curse. After Henry's death, the property changed hands several times. Most buyers stayed only a short while before moving away, each with their own unsettling tales. In the 1950s, the Parker family tried to restore the barn and use it for storage. They didn't believe in curses, but within weeks, they began to notice odd occurrences. Heavy footsteps echoed in the loft when no one was upstairs. Loud metallic crashes would ring out in the middle of the night, but nothing was ever found broken or out of place. Sometimes, a whisper would pass through the airwaves too faint to understand, like voices carried by a distant wind. One of the Parker's teenage sons told a story that still circulates locally. He claimed he went into the barn one evening to retrieve a wrench and saw a man standing near the far stall. The figure was dressed like an old farmhand, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. When the boy called out, the man didn't move. Instead, he turned and walked into the shadows, disappearing completely. The boy ran out in terror, and after that, the family kept the barn locked. By the 1970s, the place had fallen into disrepair again. Locals avoided it, but a few thrill-seekers began sneaking inside after dark. They described the same sensations over and over. Sudden cold spots, the sound of heavy boots crossing the floor, and the constant impression of being watched. One group claimed they heard someone hammering nails into wood, though the barn was empty. Another swore they saw a figure swinging from the loft rafters, only for it to vanish when they ran toward it. Paranormal investigators have visited Blackwood Barn over the years, hoping to document the activity. A team from Davenport in the early 2000s recorded several unexplained audio clips. On one, a faint voice could be heard saying, "Get back to work." On another, a metallic clang rang out, followed by what sounded like a low groan. Cameras placed in the hayloft captured strange orbs of light darting between the beams and a shadow that appeared to move on its own. One investigator described feeling a sudden pressure on his chest, as if invisible hands were pushing him backward. When he left the barn, that feeling disappeared instantly. Skeptics have their theories. They argue that old barns are full of natural noises: the creak of wood, the whistle of air through cracks, the rustle of animals nesting unseen. Some believe the so-called shadows are tricks of moonlight and dust. Still, even the most rational minds find it hard to explain the recurring temperature drops, or the way electronic devices sometimes fail the moment they're brought inside. Locals who live near the property often hear the sounds themselves. Some say that on certain nights, when the air is still and the moon is high, You can hear the echo of men's voices inside the barn, muffled, rhythmic, as if a crew was still working long into the night. Others report seeing lantern light flicker through the cracks in the walls, moving slowly from one end of the structure to the other. But when anyone draws close, the light goes out. Over time, Blackwood Barn has become a symbol of the unseen weight of history, a place where the tragedies of those who toiled and died seem to replay endlessly. Some believe the farmhands who perished there are still bound to their work, unable to rest. Others think the land itself holds on to their energy, repeating their final moments like a broken record. Today, the barn stands in silence. The paint is gone, the boards warped, the roof patched just enough to keep it standing. A no trespassing sign hangs crookedly from one of the gates, but that hasn't stopped curious souls from wandering in. Those who do rarely stay long. They describe hearing the sharp clang of metal, the brush of unseen movement, or a low voice murmuring their name. A few say they've caught glimpses of dark shapes moving near the rafters, too tall to be tricks of the eye. Willow Creek Barn sits just beyond the outskirts of Iowa City, half hidden behind a curtain of tall grass and willow trees that droop low over its roof. The boards are worn gray, the roof patched in places, and the surrounding land long overgrown. To most, it looks like any other relic of a vanished rural past, but for those who know the stories, it's far from ordinary. Locals speak of a ghostly woman who weeps within its walls, her cries echoing softly through the night air. Doors creak open when no one is near, and visitors describe sudden chills that sweep through the air as if someone unseen has just passed by. The story begins more than 100 years ago, when the land was part of a small family farm owned by the Halperns. They were a quiet couple, Samuel and his young wife, Clara. Samuel was known as a hard-working man devoted to his animals and crops, while Clara, by all accounts, was gentle and kind, often helping neighbors when illness swept through the rural community. The barn, built in the late 1890s, was the center of their lives, a place of steady labor and quiet joy, filled with the sounds of animals and the smell of hay and earth. But in the winter of 1902, tragedy came to the Halpern farm. Clara was expecting their first child, and the weather that year was particularly cruel. Snow piled high along the fences, cutting them off from the nearest town. When Clara went into labor one bitterly cold night, Samuel sent a neighbor on horseback to fetch the doctor, but the roads were nearly impassable. Hours passed as the wind howled through the valley, and by the time help arrived, it was too late. Clara and her child both died before sunrise. According to local lore, Samuel was never the same after that night. He buried his wife and child beneath the willow trees near the barn, the same trees that now hang low and whisper in the wind. Neighbors said they could hear him talking to a grave at dusk, his voice soft and broken. A few months later, Samuel disappeared entirely. Some believed he left to start anew somewhere else. Others whispered that grief had driven him to take his own life. Whatever the truth, the farm was abandoned soon after, left to the slow decay of time. Not long after Samuel's disappearance, people passing by the property began to tell strange stories. Travelers on the old dirt road claimed they heard the faint sound of a woman crying, carried on the breeze that swept down from the hills. A few said they saw a light glowing faintly inside the barn at night, even though no one lived there anymore. When a new family eventually purchased the land in the 1920s, they tried to dismiss the rumors as superstition. But it wasn't long before they, too, encountered things they couldn't explain. The wife of the new owner, a practical woman named Margaret, was the first to speak of the crying. She said that on her first night there, she woke to the sound of soft sobs drifting through the open window, coming not from the farmhouse, but from the direction of the barn. Thinking perhaps an animal had become trapped, she went out with a lantern. The barn doors creaked open on their own before she reached them, and the temperature dropped so sharply she could see her breath in the air. Inside, she found nothing but shadows and the slow, rhythmic drip of water from the roof. Yet the crying continued, seeming to come from somewhere above her. In the years that followed, the family grew used to strange happenings. Doors that had been firmly latched would swing open. Tools moved from one spot to another overnight. and animals became skittish whenever dusk approached. Sometimes they would find small, wet footprints on the barn's wooden floor, though no one could explain where they came from. Despite the fear it caused, the family never left. They came to believe that the spirit meant no harm, that it was Clara, forever mourning the life she lost. By the 1950s, Willow Creek Barn had become one of Iowa City's quiet legends. Teenagers dared each other to sneak inside at night, drawn by tales of the crying woman. Some returned shaken, insisting they heard the sound of a baby's faint whimpering beneath the mother's soft sobs. Others said they felt a sudden rush of cold air, as though someone invisible brushed past them. A few swore they saw the faint outline of a woman near the loft window, her head bowed, her long hair flowing as if caught in an unseen wind. Paranormal investigators eventually took interest in the site. In the 1980s, a small team visited the barn with audio recorders and cameras. They documented drastic temperature drops near the haylofts, sometimes by as much as 20 degrees, and recorded what sounded like muffled crying. On one tape, a quiet voice could be heard, whispering a single word, "Please." The team left shaken, describing a powerful sense of sorrow that lingered long after they exited the barn. Skeptics, of course, have offered natural explanations. The crying, they argue, might be the sound of wind rushing through the broken beams, and the cold spots could be caused by drafts through the old structure. But even those who dismiss the stories admit that something about Willow Creek Barn feels heavy, as though the air itself remembers what happened there. Locals who live near the property still treat the area with respect. Some leave flowers or small trinkets near the willow trees, believing it brings peace to Clara's spirit. Others claim that if you stand quietly by the barn at twilight, you can hear the faint murmur of her voice, soft and pleading, carried through the rustling leaves. One of the most chilling stories came from a photographer who visited a few years ago to document old rural buildings. While inside the barn, she felt a sudden chill and noticed the heavy wooden doors slowly creaking open by themselves. When she developed her film later, one image stood out. Near the corner of the barn, in a shaft of light, was a faint silhouette of a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her face blurred but unmistakably human. Today, Willow Creek Barn remains abandoned, its silence occasionally broken by the call of birds or the sigh of wind through its rafters. Yet those who have stood inside it describe the same sensation, a deep sadness that seems to seep from the walls. Some say it feels as though time itself has stopped there, holding on to one terrible night and a mother's endless grief. Red Oak Barn stands on a quiet patch of farmland near Council Bluffs, Iowa, where the wind moves through tall grass and the air feels perpetually still. The structure, once proud and vital, has sagged with time, its roof caved in places, its red paint faded to a ghostly pink. From a distance, it looks like any other abandoned barn dotting the countryside. But those who've stepped inside tell a different story. They speak of glowing orbs hovering between the rafters, phantom hoofbeats echoing through the stalls, and dark shapes that move just beyond the light. The story of Red Oak Barn begins in the early 1900s, when it was built by a farmer named George Weller. He was known throughout the region for his prized livestock, cattle, and horses that won ribbons at local fairs. Weller took great pride in his work and was rumored to have an uncanny way with animals. People said they responded to his voice as though they understood him. The barn itself was his masterpiece, built with sturdy oak beams and a spacious interior designed to house the best of his herd. But by the late 1930s, everything began to unravel. That year, an unexplained illness swept through the farm. It started with one cow that refused to eat and began pacing its stall endlessly. Within days, more animals fell ill, shivering, restless, and behaving strangely, as though terrified of something unseen. Weller called veterinarians from across the county, but no one could identify the cause. The animals began dying one by one, and with each death, the barn grew quieter, emptier, and darker. By winter, nearly the entire herd was gone. The loss broke Weller's spirit. Locals recalled seeing him standing by the barn long after sundown, staring into the darkened stalls as though expecting something to move. Some said he started hearing things' hooves pounding the dirt when the barn was empty. the sound of snorting and lowing echoing through the rafters. Others claimed he spoke of glowing eyes watching him from the shadows. Then, one night in early 1941, George Weller disappeared. His neighbors found the barn doors wide open, swaying in the cold wind. Inside, they discovered hoofprints embedded deep in the dirt floor fresh, though there hadn't been animals there in months. The hoofprints circled the interior again and again, as if something invisible had been pacing in agitation. George was never found. After his disappearance, the farm was abandoned, left to decay under decades of neglect. For years, the locals stayed away. Children dared each other to run up and touch the barn's doors, but few ever ventured inside. Those who did claimed they could hear the faint sounds of livestock moving within the shuffle of hooves, the creak of wooden stalls, and the occasional low rumble of a cow's breath. Some even said they saw glowing orbs floating near the rafters, flickering like lanterns before vanishing completely. In the 1960s, a group of teenagers from Council Bluffs decided to explore the barn one autumn night. They entered with flashlights, laughing at the old ghost stories. But their laughter didn't last long. Within minutes, they heard the sound of hooves circling them, slow, deliberate steps in the dirt. The beams of their flashlights cut through the darkness, but revealed nothing. Then came the sound of heavy breathing, low and labored, as though an unseen animal stood just inches away. Panicked, they ran for the exit, but one of the boys looked back. He later claimed he saw the faint outline of a horse standing in the far stall, its eyes glowing white. When he blinked, it was gone. Word of the encounter spread quickly through town, cementing Red Oak Barn's reputation as a place haunted not by people, but by the restless spirits of animals. Paranormal investigators began to take interest in the following decades. A team in the 1980s brought recording equipment and electromagnetic sensors. They reported strange energy spikes near the center of the barn and unexplained sounds that mimicked hooves striking the ground. On one recording, a faint whinny could be heard, soft but unmistakable. Another clip captured what sounded like a heartbeat that grew louder and faster before abruptly stopping. Visitors often report feeling uneasy inside the barn, describing it as if the air itself is alive and watching. Sudden drops in temperature occur without warning, and even in the middle of summer, cold drafts sweep across the floor. Some people claim to feel pressure against their shoulders, as if brushed by the flank of a large animal. Others swear they've heard chains rattling from the empty stalls, followed by the echo of hooves pounding the ground. Skeptics suggest more earthly explanations. They point out that barns of that age are filled with creaking beams and loose boards that create eerie noises when the wind shifts. The orbs of light, they argue, could be dust or insects catching reflections from headlights on the nearby road. And yet, even the most rational visitors often leave unsettled. Many say the place feels wrong, too heavy, too still, as though holding on to a grief that never fades. One particularly chilling account came from a local photographer who visited Red Oak Barn in 2004 to document Iowa's forgotten farms. She set up her tripod in the main corridor and began shooting long exposures. When she reviewed the photos later that evening, she noticed something she couldn't explain. In one image, taken in total darkness, faint shapes appeared, large, rounded forms resembling the bodies of cattle standing in a row. Their eyes glowed faintly in the camera's flash, reflecting light that wasn't there. Another story came from a couple of hunters who camped nearby one November night. Thinking it was a stray horse, they stepped out with flashlights. The sound continued for several minutes, circling them in the dark, but the beams of their lights revealed nothing. When they approached the barn, the noise stopped instantly, replaced by an eerie silence. Only the smell of hay and something faintly metallic-like blood hung in the air. Today, Red Oak Barn remains empty, its interior blanketed in dust and silence. The stalls are lined with old iron latches, some still bearing faint scorch marks, as though they'd been overheated long ago. Visitors who step inside often find fresh hoofprints pressed into the dirt, though there hasn't been livestock on the property for generations. A few have tried to sweep the prints away, only to find them reappear days later. Locals say that on certain nights, when the moonlight hits the barn just right, You can see shadows moving through the stall shapes that shift and flicker like restless animals, pacing their pens. Some claim to hear the low rumble of a herd in motion, the pounding of phantom hooves echoing across the field. Whether it's the restless spirits of Weller's lost livestock, or simply the residue of tragedy imprinted on the land. One thing remains certain: the barn still feels alive. Hickory Lane Barn in Cedar Falls has stood for more than a century, its weathered boards gray with time and its roof bowing slightly under decades of storms. Once the heart of a bustling family farm, it now sits silent among the rolling Iowa fields, except for the stories that claim it isn't quite empty. Locals say a former farmer still walks its grounds, carrying a flickering lantern, ensuring that his land remains watched over even from beyond the grave. By day, the barn seems unremarkable, its faded red paint peeling in wide flakes, the scent of hay and dust lingering in the air, and the wind weaving soft whistles through the slats. But once night falls, Hickory Lane transforms. The air grows colder, the darkness thicker, and the silence deeper. Visitors claim that if you stand by the gate and listen, you'll hear faint footsteps crunching across the gravel path that leads to the barn doors. Sometimes, a dim orange light flickers inside, as though someone were moving about with an old kerosene lantern. Yet, when anyone dares to look inside, the light disappears, leaving only the smell of oil and the hollow echo of wind through the rafters. The legend dates back to the 1930s, when the farm belonged to a man named Thomas Everett. Everett was known as a hard-working, stoic farmer who tended his livestock and fields with quiet devotion. His wife had passed away young, leaving him alone to maintain the property. Neighbors recalled seeing him working long after sundown, lantern in hand, checking the stalls and securing the gates before retreating to his small farmhouse. Then, one winter, tragedy struck. A blizzard rolled across Cedar Falls, freezing the land solid and isolating the countryside. When the storm cleared, neighbors went to check on Everett and found his body inside the barn, collapsed near the back door, his lantern extinguished beside him. The coroner determined he had likely been inspecting the livestock when he suffered a heart attack, his body freezing before dawn. It was a lonely death, fitting for a man who had spent his final years in solitude. The property passed through several owners afterward, yet none stayed for long. Strange events began to plague the barn soon after Everett's passing. Horses grew restless near the stalls, refusing to enter after dark. Workers heard footsteps pacing along the loft when no one was there. Lanterns hung in the barn would swing violently, even when the air was still, and sometimes the faint glow of a single light could be seen moving slowly across the fields, toward the barn, just as Everett once did. One of the earliest recorded encounters came from a farmhand in 1949. He had been hired to maintain the property and spent his nights in a small cabin near the edge of the pasture. One evening, while repairing a fence, he noticed a dim light moving inside the barn. Thinking vandals or trespassers had entered, he grabbed a rifle and went to investigate. When he opened the barn door, the light vanished instantly. The interior was empty, the hay undisturbed, but as he turned to leave, he felt a wave of icy air sweep past him and heard the faint creak of boots crossing the wooden floorboards behind him. He fled that night and never returned. In the decades since, countless explorers, thrill-seekers, and paranormal investigators have been drawn to Hickory Lane Barn. Some come with cameras, others with recording devices, hoping to capture proof of the supernatural. Many leave with the same chilling stories. In audio recordings, soft murmurs have been detected, words too faint to decipher, but consistent with the rhythm of human speech. Flashlights flicker and die without explanation. Cold spots appear suddenly, often near the main doors or along the path to the old farmhouse foundation. One group of investigators reported seeing a misty figure standing near the hayloft ladder, holding what looked like a lantern, before vanishing when approached. Locals who live nearby take the hauntings seriously, though they speak of Everett's ghost with a kind of quiet respect rather than fear. Many believe he's not a malicious spirit, but rather a restless guardian, ensuring that the land he loved remains cared for. They say that every autumn, when the harvest moon rises over the fields, The faint glow of his lantern can be seen moving through the barn and out across the pasture. It's said that the light flickers 3 times before fading, a sign, perhaps, of the old farmer completing his nightly rounds. There's also the matter of the temperature drops. Visitors often describe the air inside the barn as unnaturally cold, even in the height of summer. The chill seems to intensify near certain corners of the building, especially around the back door, where Everett's body was found. Some who've stayed too long report the feeling of being watched, an unmistakable presence, silent but heavy, as though someone stands just behind them in the dark. A few claim to have caught the faint scent of tobacco smoke, a nod to Everett's pipe, which was discovered beside him on the night he died. Despite its haunted reputation, Hickory Lane Barn still draws people from across Iowa. Photographers love its weathered charm, and paranormal enthusiasts consider it one of the state's most active rural locations. Even skeptics leave unsettled, often remarking on the strange silence that falls whenever they approach the doors. The sound of crickets, the rustle of leaves, even the distant hum of the highway all seem to fade into nothing, as if the barn itself holds its breath. Some believe the spirit will linger until the barn finally collapses, its purpose fulfilled when the last beam falls. But others think Everett's devotion runs deeper, that as long as the land remains, so will he. On foggy nights, travelers passing along the nearby road still report seeing a faint light bobbing between the trees. Moving steadily toward the barn, it's always the same soft orange glow, weaving through the mist before fading into the shadows. The Prairie Shadows Barn outside Ames stands as a relic of Iowa's rural pasta, sprawling wooden structure framed by wind-bent trees and tall whispering grass. By day, it looks like any other century-old barn, its boards faded gray with time and its roof mottled with rust. But when night falls, it becomes something else entirely. The locals call it Prairie Shadows for a reason. The building seems to come alive after dark, its interior flickering with phantom lights, the echo of unseen footsteps, and the eerie sound of chains dragging across the wooden floors. The barn's history is steeped in tragedy, and those who have studied its past believe that the energy of what happened there never truly left. It was built in the late 1800s by a man named Samuel Price, a farmer who arrived in Ames with dreams of raising prize cattle and creating a thriving business. For a while, he succeeded. The barn was enormous for its time, 3 stories tall, with a wide loft and enough stalls for over 24 animals. Its whitewashed walls gleamed in the summer sun, and travelers along the old country road would often stop just to admire its craftsmanship. But the success of the Price farm was short-lived. In the spring of 1903. A lantern left burning in the hayloft started a fire that quickly spread through the entire structure. Samuel and his eldest son, William, rushed inside to free the animals, while his wife and 2 younger children tried to form a bucket line from the nearby well. Witnesses from neighboring farms later said they could see the flames rising high into the night sky. By the time the fire was contained, Samuel and William were gone. Their bodies were found near the north stalls, clutching the chains used to release the livestock. The horses and cows they tried to save perished beside them. The surviving family rebuilt, but the land never seemed to recover. Strange occurrences began soon after construction was complete. The new barn, erected on the same foundation, echoed with unexplained sounds, metal clanging, footsteps in the rafters, and the low rumble of animal noises, even when the stalls were empty. Workers often refused to stay past dusk, claiming they could hear voices calling from the hayloft or the sound of something heavy being dragged along the floor. One man swore he saw the shadow of a figure climbing the ladder to the loft, only to vanish halfway up. As years passed, tragedy returned to Prairie Shadows. In the 1920s, a hired hand named George Fuller was repairing one of the beams when he slipped and fell to his death. His coworkers later said that moments before he fell, he froze suddenly, staring at something behind them, as though he had seen someone or something standing in the rafters. During the 1940s, another fire broke out under mysterious circumstances. This time, it was smaller and quickly contained, but no source for the blaze was ever found. After that, the barn gained its infamous name. The locals began to whisper that it was cursed, a place where fire and death would always return. By the 1960s, the farm was abandoned, left to rot among the tall grass and the quiet fields. The barn's white paint faded into ghostly gray, the windows dark and empty. Yet people continued to see lights inside, soft orange glows like lanterns swinging gently through the darkness. Teenagers who dared each other to enter reported hearing the metallic clank of chains hanging from the beams, even when none were visible. Some described feeling intense waves of heat, as though standing near an open flame, followed by sudden blasts of cold air that left their breath visible even in summer. One local police officer, responding to a trespassing call in the 1980s, reported seeing a figure moving through the hayloft. He described it as tall, wearing old-fashioned work clothes, carrying a faintly glowing light. When he called out, the figure disappeared, and a heavy silence fell over the property. Moments later, he heard what he believed were chains scraping across the floor above him, followed by the sound of horses stamping their hooves. But when he climbed the ladder to the loft, there was nothing, no person, no light, no sound. Over time, ghost hunters and paranormal researchers began visiting Prairie Shadow's barn, drawn by its reputation. Many claim that their equipment behaves erratically. Their EMF detectors spiked near the northern stalls, where Samuel and William died. Recorders capture faint metallic sounds, sometimes a voice calling out for help, sometimes a deep sigh. On several occasions, visitors reported seeing glowing orbs drifting through the hayloft, pulsing like embers before fading into the air. Others have felt invisible hands brush against their shoulders or tug gently at their sleeves, as if someone were trying to guide them away from danger. Locals tell a story that on especially cold nights, when fog rolls over the prairie, the entire barn flickers with light for a few brief seconds, just enough to make out shadowy figures moving between the beams. Some say they are Samuel and William, endlessly reliving their final moments, trying to save their animals from the fire. Others believe they are simply caretakers of the place, spirits bound to the land that took their lives. A few residents living nearby have even reported hearing the distant neighing of horses or the rattling of metal from their porches when the wind is still. Despite decades of decay, the structure remains standing, a monument to endurance, both physical and spectral. The inside is littered with old tools and rusted chains, their purpose long forgotten, but their presence impossible to ignore. The smell of smoke lingers faintly in the air, though no fire has burned there in generations. Even the sunlight seems to struggle inside, casting long bars of gold that feel colder than they should. Skeptics say the hauntings are the product of local imagination, fueled by tragic history and the eerie acoustics of old wood. But those who have stood inside Prairie Shadows after sunset speak differently. They describe the way the air grows heavy, pressing against the lungs. They describe hearing faint murmurs from above and seeing movement in the corners of their eyes. And they describe the moment always sudden when the quiet gives way to the unmistakable sound of chains clanging against wood, echoing through the empty stalls like a warning from another time. The Elmwood barn of Dubuque sits quietly at the edge of an old farmstead, its once red siding faded to a deep, weather-beaten brown, surrounded by sloping fields and thick clusters of elm trees. The structure looks peaceful in the daylight, just another relic of Iowa's agricultural past. But when darkness falls, locals say, the atmosphere changes. The air grows colder, the wind quieter, and the barn seems to breathe with an energy that does not belong to the living. For more than a century, stories have circulated about the ghost of a former stable master who never left his post, still pacing the loft and watching over horses that are long gone. The barn's history dates back to the late 1800s, when it was part of a large family estate owned by the Mallory family, one of Dubuque's early settlers. The farm was prosperous, known for its strong horses and fine breeding stock. The man responsible for maintaining that reputation was Henry Cole, the farm's stable master. Henry was a hard-working, loyal man, quiet, disciplined, and deeply protective of the animals in his care. Neighbors often said he loved the horses more than he loved people. Every night, long after the Mallory family had gone to bed, Henry could still be seen tending to the stalls, brushing coats, checking locks and ensuring everything was in perfect order before extinguishing his lantern and climbing to the loft to sleep. But in 1911, tragedy struck. According to old records, Henry was found dead one morning near the stalls. The coroner's report listed the cause as a broken neck from an apparent fall from the loft ladder. Some claimed it was an accident. He had likely slipped in the dark while descending to check on a restless horse. Others, however, whispered that it might not have been an accident at all. Rumors spread that Henry had quarreled with a farmhand the night before, accusing him of neglecting the animals. There were even quiet suggestions that the fight had turned violent, but nothing was ever proven. The death was ruled accidental, and the farm continued to operate. The strange events began not long after Henry's burial. Within weeks, the new stablemaster reported hearing footsteps echoing across the barn after midnight slow. Deliberate steps on the wooden loft above. Thinking a thief or intruder had entered, he would climb the ladder, only to find the loft empty. Doors that had been bolted shut were found swinging open in the morning. Tools left hanging neatly on the walls would be found scattered across the floor. The horses, usually calm, began to panic at odd hours, whinnying and kicking as though reacting to something unseen. By the 1930s, Elmwood Barn had earned its haunted reputation. Farmhands came and went, each leaving with tales of eerie experiences. Some reported hearing faint whispers that seemed to come from the rafters, low, indistinct murmurs that stopped the moment they tried to listen closer. Others swore they felt someone brush past them in the dark, though no one was there. And nearly everyone who worked there claimed to have seen a figure standing in the loft, watching from above, with the faint outline of a man in suspenders and a brimmed hat. When anyone climbed up to investigate, the figure would vanish. During the 1950s, the property changed hands and fell into disrepair. Yet, the reports continued. Local teenagers who dared each other to spend the night inside described doors slamming violently in the middle of the night and the heavy thud of boots pacing along the upper beams. One group claimed they heard a man's voice whisper, "Easy, boy," as though soothing a nervous horse. They fled when a nearby stall door flew open on its own. Another visitor described seeing a lantern glow in the loft, swinging gently as if carried by an unseen hand. The legend of Henry Cole grew with time, becoming part of Dubuque's folklore. Paranormal investigators began visiting Elmwood Barn, setting up cameras and audio recorders in hopes of capturing proof of the stablemaster's lingering presence. Many reported unexplained noises, chains clinking, the soft shuffle of footsteps, and distinct male murmurs picked up on tape. One recording, taken near the base of the loft ladder, reportedly captured a deep voice saying, "They're safe now," followed by a sound resembling the creak of a stable door closing. Not everyone who visits feels fear, though. Some claim the barn carries a protective energy, as if Henry's ghost is still watching over his domain. On cold nights, a faint warmth can sometimes be felt in the main stall area, and the smell of hay, mixed with the faint aroma of pipe tobacco, lingers in the air. Old records confirm that Henry often smoked a pipe while working. Visitors also describe a curious phenomenon, the sound of a horse softly exhaling, as if being comforted by an unseen hand. In more recent years, Elmwood Barn has become a destination for those drawn to the paranormal. Local tour guides include it in haunted history walks, warning guests not to provoke the spirit. Witnesses consistently report the same things: a heavy presence in the loft, sudden temperature drops, and the unmistakable sound of boots walking behind them when no one else is near. Some have even captured photos showing a faint silhouette by the upper window, a dark outline of a man looking down, as if still keeping watch. One of the most chilling encounters came from a photographer documenting historic barns across Iowa. While taking a long exposure shot of Elmwood Barn at dusk, he noticed what looked like a faint light glowing from inside the loft window. Assuming it was a trick of the sun, he didn't think much of it until he reviewed his photos later that night. In the image, standing in the loft opening, was a translucent figure of a man wearing old-fashioned work clothes, gazing directly at the camera. The photographer, unnerved, returned to the site the next day and found no lights, no ladders, and no way anyone could have stood in that spot without being noticed. Today, The barn stands as a quiet monument to its past. The wood creaks, the wind hums through the slats, and the hayloft still holds the scent of years gone by. Some say Henry Cole continues to do what he always did, keeping watch over his horses, tending to his duties long after life ended. Others believe his spirit remains because he never knew rest, trapped in a loop of responsibility and devotion. Whatever the reason, Elmwood Barn remains alive with his memory. Hawthorne Barn in Mason City stands at the end of an old gravel road, surrounded by overgrown fields and the silent remains of what was once a thriving family farm. The barn's faded red boards lean slightly under the weight of time, and ivy creeps up the sides like dark veins. To passers-by, it might look like any other abandoned rural structure, but locals know better. They call it one of Mason City's most haunted places, a site where human and animal spirits are said to linger, replaying fragments of a life that ended too suddenly and too tragically. The barn was built in the late 1890s by the Hawthorne family, who moved to the area seeking a fresh start after hard times in Illinois. They were known as skilled horse breeders, and for a while, the farm flourished. Its stalls once held some of the finest draft horses in northern Iowa, and travelers often stopped to admire them. But beneath the success, there was sorrow. Records tell of sickness that swept through the livestock, financial troubles that nearly bankrupted the family, and finally, a devastating fire that changed everything. According to local historians, the fire broke out one night in 1914. It started in the eastern wing of the barn, likely from a lantern left burning after evening chores. The blaze spread fast, fueled by dry hay and timber. The family rushed to save their animals, but the flames were merciless. Horses panicked and screamed inside the stalls as smoke filled the air. Neighbors who came running later described the sight as a nightmare of red and black. When the fire was finally contained, only the central frame of the barn stood, charred and hollow. The Hawthornes lost nearly all their livestock, and one of their sons, young Jacob, perished in the chaos after running inside to free a trapped mare. After the fire, the family rebuilt what they could, refusing to abandon their land. But from that moment forward, the farm was never the same. Workers began reporting strange occurrences inside the barn. Doors would swing open on their own, even on windless days. Tools vanished and reappeared in odd places. Horses, usually calm, grew restless and refused to enter certain stalls. The family tried to ignore it, but the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing year. It wasn't long before they started hearing voices, soft, distant calls that seemed to drift through the rafters. Visitors over the decades have described the same unnerving experience. The sensation of being watched from the upper windows. Some have seen what looks like a pale figure staring down from the loft, motionless, expressionless, and gone the moment they blinked. Others claim to have heard someone calling names in the darkness, sometimes the names of the Hawthorne children, sometimes their own. The voice, they say, is neither male nor female, but distant, hollow, as if carried through time itself. Perhaps the most disturbing reports, though, involve the animals. Many who have explored the barn after dark insist they've seen ghostly shapes moving between the stalls, shimmering outlines of horses, their forms faint and translucent. Witnesses describe hearing the soft clop of hooves on the wooden floor, the sound of a saddle creaking, or the gentle snort of an unseen animal. One visitor even claimed she felt something brush against her shoulder, like the muzzle of a horse nuzzling her hand, though nothing was there when she turned. By the 1950s, the barn had been abandoned completely. The Hawthorne descendants sold the land, and it fell into disrepair. Yet the stories persisted. Teenagers dared each other to go inside after sunset, and many emerged pale and trembling. Some said they saw a lantern light flickering in the loft, though no one was up there. Others described seeing a figure walking the perimeter of the field, a tall man with a limp, holding a rope or whip, who would vanish if approached. Paranormal investigators have since made Hawthorne Barn a regular stop, setting up cameras and audio recorders in hopes of documenting the activity. They report cold spots that seem to move from stall to stall and unexplained voices captured on tape. In one recording, a whisper clearly says the name Jacob, followed by the sound of hooves striking wood. Another recording captured a distant cry that some believed to be a horse in distress. Skeptics argue the noises could be from animals outside or structural shifting, but those who've stood inside the barn describe a silence too deep, too absolute, for natural explanations. The ghostly sightings often focus on the loft. Many visitors describe the uneasy feeling that someone is standing above them, peering through the cracks in the floorboards. A few have even seen a shadow cross the upper window, slow and deliberate, though no one else was present. The phenomenon seems to intensify around the anniversary of the fire. Locals claim that every year, on that date, faint light appears in the loft, an orange glow that flickers like a lantern, accompanied by the distant sound of horses moving restlessly below. One story that has persisted through generations tells of a farmer who tried to restore the property in the 1970s. He planned to turn the barn into a storage building, but every attempt to work there failed. His tools would disappear overnight, only to be found rusted or broken the next morning. On one occasion, he said he heard a voice call out to him by name while he was repairing a stall door. When he looked up, he saw a young man standing near the loft ladder, his clothes charred, his face pale. The figure vanished before his eyes. The farmer abandoned the project and sold the land within months. Today, Hawthorne Barn remains mostly untouched. Its wooden beams are weathered, its paint long gone, yet its structure still holds firmness, though held together by the memories of those who once lived and died there. Travelers passing along the nearby road sometimes report lights glowing faintly through the cracks, or shadows moving within when no one is around. Some even say they've seen the shape of a horse standing just outside the entrance, only to watch it fade away into the mist. Locals believe the spirits that haunt the barn are not malevolent, but bound by love and loss. The stable master, the boy Jacob, and the loyal animals all share the same fate, forever tied to the place where their lives ended. The disembodied voices that call names are said to be searching for one another, echoes of a night that will never fully fade. The animal's spectral presence, too, seems peaceful, as if they continue their quiet routines under the watch of those who once cared for them. Oak Ridge Barn, just beyond the outskirts of Fort Dodge, stands as a quiet silhouette against the Iowa plains, a hulking wooden structure weathered by decades of wind and time. Once a bustling center of farm life, it now sits in near silence, its faded red boards peeling, its roof sagging, its fields long gone to weeds. Locals say that silence is never complete here. For those who linger after dusk, there are noises that defy explanation: faint, metallic clangs, whispers riding on the breeze, and footsteps pacing through the stalls of a barn that hasn't seen a living farmhand in half a century. The story of Oak Ridge Barn begins in the early 1900s, when it was part of a thriving family farm. Its owner, Thomas Ellery, was known as a hard-working man with an unmatched devotion to his land. He built the barn himself, cutting and hauling timber from nearby forests, raising its beams with the help of neighbors in a single long summer. For years, Oak Ridge was the pride of the Regina Strong, spacious barn that housed horses, cattle, and equipment essential to the Ellery farm's success. But one autumn morning in 1938, tragedy struck. Thomas had been repairing one of the upper beams in the loft when his footing gave way. He fell onto the hard floor below, crushing a lantern that had been burning nearby. The spilled oil ignited instantly, and flames spread with terrifying speed. Neighbors rushed to help, but by the time they arrived, the barn was engulfed. His body was later found near the back stalls, close to the tool bench he had been working beside. The cause of death, the coroner said, was a mix of smoke inhalation and blunt trauma from the fall. The barn was rebuilt over the charred remains of the old foundation, but many said it never felt the same. Tools went missing only to reappear days later. Horses refused to stay inside overnight, kicking and snorting until released into the pasture. Farmhands reported hearing hammering in the middle of the night, as if someone were still mending the structure long after everyone else had gone home. By the 1950s, after a string of bad harvests and strange incidents, the Ellery family sold the property. Since then, Oak Ridge Barn has passed through several owners, most of whom never stayed long. Some complained of cold spots in the air that seemed to move through the building like invisible currents. Others spoke of shadowy figures seen in the corners of the loft, moving with the rhythm of someone carrying a heavy load. One former caretaker described locking up one night only to hear the sound of metal scraping behind him. When he turned, he saw a shovel swinging slightly on its hook, as if it had just been used. The caretaker left that same evening, refusing to return. Another visitor, a paranormal researcher from Des Moines, claimed that his motion sensors detected movement in the exact spot where Thomas had died. The readings, he said, were unlike anything he'd seen before. Brief bursts of temperature fluctuation, followed by the sound of what he could only describe as distant hammering. Perhaps the most chilling reports come from those who have heard the clanging of tools in the still of night. Witnesses describe it as rhythmic, almost purposeful, as though someone were repairing something just out of sight. When they follow the sound, it stops. Some have even claimed to see a lantern's faint glow swaying in the darkness, moving slowly along the barn's interior walkway before fading completely. Locals say the spirit of Thomas Ellery remains tethered to the barn, bound by the unfinished work of that fateful day. The idea is not far-fetched. To those who believe, the energy of a tragic death can linger in a place, replaying fragments of its final moments. The clang of a hammer, the creak of wood, the faint shuffle of boots across straw. Sound is a whisper from the past, a reminder of the life and labor that once filled these walls. In the colder months, when fog settles low over the fields, Oak Ridge Barn takes on an especially eerie quality. The structure appears to breathe with the land, expanding and contracting with the frost. Travelers on the nearby road have reported seeing a flickering light in the windows, swaying as though carried by someone walking from stall to stall. When they approach, the barn is empty. Some say Thomas's presence isn't hostile, just restless. There are no reports of aggression, only unease. Visitors often describe the overwhelming sensation of being watched, of someone standing just behind them in the dark. Those who have dared to stay inside overnight speak of hearing deep sighs, faint footsteps in the loft, and the unmistakable sound of metal striking metal, echoing through the rafters. Investigators who have recorded audio inside the barn claim to have captured faint voices, low, gravelly tones that repeat simple phrases, "still working," or "fix it." Whether these are true paranormal occurrences or tricks of the imagination remains a matter of debate. But even skeptics admit there's something unexplainable about Oak Ridge Barn's atmosphere. As the years have passed, nature has slowly reclaimed the property. Weeds curl around the fence posts, and ivy climbs the walls like green veins. Yet the barn remains upright, sturdy in its defiance of time. Locals occasionally see the faint glow of light through the cracks in its siding, even on moonless nights. Some whisper that Thomas's spirit continues his repairs, refusing to rest until his barn is whole again. Silver Creek Barn, nestled just outside Burlington, has long stood as a weathered sentinel over the rolling Iowa fields. From a distance, its red-painted boards seem almost picturesque, framed by tall grass and swaying trees. But locals know the truth. The barn is steeped in tragedy, and its history continues to echo through the decades. For nearly a century, stories of ghostly flames, sudden chills, and the lingering scent of smoke have kept the barn's legacy alive, making it one of the region's most haunted sites. The barn was built in the early 1900s by the Miller family, who had moved to Burlington seeking fertile land and a new beginning. They constructed it with care, raising sturdy wooden beams and filling the stalls with horses, cows, and storage for grain. Life on the farm was hard but steady, with the barn serving as the heart of daily routines. Early photographs show the Miller children smiling in front of the barn, their small hands resting on the fence, oblivious to the events that would one day stain its history. The disaster that would define Silver Creek Barn occurred in the summer of 1927. A lantern had been left, burning in the loft, perhaps by a tired farmhand or one of the Miller children helping with chores. The flames spread quickly through the hay, igniting the dry timber and straw. Panic overtook the family as the fire consumed the upper levels and smoke poured through the windows. Neighbors raced to help, but by the time the blaze was extinguished, the barn was mostly destroyed. The fire claimed the lives of 2 workers who had rushed inside to rescue the animals, and the family lost several prized horses to the flames. Witnesses said the sky glowed red for hours, and the smell of smoke lingered over the fields long after the fire was out. In the years following the tragedy, Silver Creek Barn was rebuilt, but locals insist it never recovered its former life. Stories began circulating of ghostly flames flickering inside the empty loft, visible from outside even on moonless nights. Some claim that the smoke can still be smelled, a faint, acrid reminder of that fateful day in 1927. It is said that the spirits of the workers and animals remain bound to the barn by the intensity of the fire and the suddenness of their deaths. Those who have ventured inside report strange and unsettling phenomena. Some describe a sudden drop in temperature, a cold that seems to cling to the skin no matter how many layers are worn. Others hear the soft crackle of fire, as if flames are dancing just out of reach, even when no evidence of combustion exists. Shadowy figures are sometimes seen moving along the beams, and a faint, warm orange glow has been reported in the loft, hovering as though someone is tending to the embers. Local teenagers and urban explorers have long been drawn to the barn, daring each other to spend a night within its walls. Many recount hearing footsteps pacing the loft or the soft whinny of horses echoing through the stalls. Some claim to have seen the silhouette of a man moving through the smoke-filled air, lantern in hand, only to vanish when approached. Others have smelled smoke in rooms where there is no fire, the scent thick and unmistakable, clinging to clothing and hair before fading slowly. Paranormal investigators have studied Silver Creek Barn extensively. Audio recordings sometimes capture faint voices, murmuring indistinctly, while cameras pick up orbs of light that appear to flicker like tiny flames. EMF meters spike inexplicably, particularly near the site where the loft collapsed during the fire. Investigators report that these occurrences are not constant but appear sporadically, often late at night or during humid summer evenings when the air hangs heavy over the fields. Some witnesses have even claimed to see spectral animals moving silently through the stalls. Horses appear as translucent shapes, their forms shimmering in the moonlight, ears pricked as if listening. Occasionally, a cow or goat is reported pacing quietly, disappearing when approached. Those who observe them describe a sense of profound sadness, as if the spirits are replaying their last moments in the barn, trapped in the memory of the fire. Locals tell that the Miller family never fully recovered emotionally from the fire, and the farm eventually changed hands. Each new owner experienced similar phenomena, doors that slammed without cause, the faint smell of smoke that appeared suddenly, and glimpses of ghostly flames that no one could explain. Despite attempts to modernize and repair the barn, its haunted reputation persisted, passing from one generation to the next as a warning and a story of sorrow. On foggy nights, the barn takes on an especially eerie presence. The moonlight glints off the broken glass in the windows, casting long shadows across the interior beams. From outside, it sometimes appears that the loft is alive with flickering light, dancing as if caught in a fire that no longer exists. A low, metallic crackle can be heard at times, like the soft hiss of burning straw or the snapping of smoldering wood. Visitors often leave with goosebumps and a sense that the barn itself is watching, holding the memory of the fire and those lost within its walls. Yet there is a strange respect in the hauntings. No one has reported malevolent activity, no attacks, no threats, only the eerie repetition of past events. Some believe that the spirits remain to ensure the animals are never forgotten, to replay the tragedy as a reminder of life's fragility, and perhaps to warn those who enter to tread carefully. Even modern photographers and historians who document the barn speak of a solemnity within the air, a heavy stillness that feels sacred, as though the past is observing the present. Willow Bend Barn, tucked just outside Ottawa, stands as a weathered relic of Iowa's farming past, its timbers gray with age and its roof sagging under decades of neglect. By day, it looks quiet and unassuming, blending into the rolling fields and wind-swept trees surrounding it. But when night falls, The barn transforms. Locals speak of strange lights flickering in the loft, whispers echoing through the rafters, and shadowy figures moving silently between hay bales. Those who venture inside after dark leave with more than just stories. They leave with an unshakable sense that the past has never truly left Willow Bend. The barn was built in the late 1800s by the Matthews family, who had settled in Ottawa seeking fertile land and a fresh start. Known for their work ethic and dedication to their livestock, the Matthews family expanded the farm quickly, building the large barn to house horses, cattle, and essential equipment. Its interior was spacious, with high beams and a wide loft used for hay storage. The family worked tirelessly, and for decades, the barn was the heart of the farm, echoing with the sounds of daily life, the stamping of hooves, the creaking of harnesses, and the laughter of children playing among the bales. But as time passed, tragedy and misfortune began to leave their mark. In the 1920s, a series of unexplained accidents occurred. Livestock were found dead under mysterious circumstances, and workers reported sudden chills or the sensation of being watched. The family endured these events with a grim acceptance, believing them to be misfortune, until a fire broke out in the loft one summer. Though it was quickly contained, some of the stored hay was destroyed, and neighbors claimed they saw flickering flames in the windows long after the smoke had cleared. The Matthews family recovered, but locals say that the incidents marked the barn as a place where the normal rules no longer applied. By the 1950s, the farm had been sold, and the barn left largely abandoned. Soon after, tales began to circulate about Willow Bend's unusual activity. Visitors described seeing lights swinging from the loft, though no lanterns were ever hung. Others claimed to hear whispers carrying through the rafters, soft, indistinct voices that seemed to come from nowhere, calling names or murmuring warnings. People entering the barn would often feel a sudden drop in temperature, a chill that seemed to cling to the body, even during warm summer nights. One of the most persistent stories involves shadowy figures moving silently among the hay bales. Farmers and explorers alike have reported glimpses of dark shapes, their forms indistinct but unmistakably human, drifting through the barn. Some have said the figures vanish when approached, leaving only the faint smell of hay and earth behind. Others claim the spirits are less human and more animal, shadows that shift like restless horses or cattle long since gone. One witness swore he felt the weight of a cold hand brush against his shoulder while stacking hay, though when he turned, no one was there. Paranormal investigators have visited Willow Bend Barn for decades, setting up cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recorders. Many report strange readings, with devices registering unexplained spikes near the loft or in corners of the stalls. Audio equipment has captured whispers too faint to understand, sometimes interrupted by creaking wood or the sound of something heavy moving across the floor. Even skeptics admit that the barn carries an energy unlike any other, a tension that seems to thrum in the air itself. Teenagers and thrill-seekers have also been drawn to the barn, daring each other to spend nights within its walls. Some leave terrified after only a few minutes, describing footsteps pacing above them in the loft or the sensation of someone or something following their movements. Others have recounted seeing glowing lights flicker between the beams, moving with purpose, as if guiding or warning them. One group reported that as they explored the barn, the whispers grew louder, repeating fragments of their own conversations in low, chilling tones. Despite its eerie reputation, Willow Bend Barn has endured. Its wooden beams are splintered but still sturdy, its wide doors hanging slightly off their hinges, and the loft remains intact, accessible by a worn ladder. Nature has crept around it, with weeds climbing the sides and trees bending over the roof, as if in quiet guardianship. Yet even in decay, the barn is alive with stories and sightings, each new witness adding to the tapestry of the supernatural events that define it. Some say the barn's hauntings are echoes of a time when life and death were more closely entwined with the land. Perhaps the whispers come from those who worked tirelessly among the hay bales, or the figures are the lingering forms of livestock who died unexpectedly. The cold hands, the fleeting lights, and the sudden drops in temperature may be residual energy left behind by decades of toil, loss, and the inevitability of change. Whatever the cause, visitors agree on one thing: Willow Bend Barn is not a place to be taken lightly. Even today, locals avoid the barn after dusk, respecting the stories passed down through generations. Travelers along the nearby roads occasionally report strange lights in the windows or fleeting shadows in the doorway. Those brave enough to step inside describe a profound feeling of being observed, as if the barn itself remembers the lives that passed through it. For some, the experience is terrifying. For others, it is strangely moving, a connection to a history that refuses to be forgotten. Standing in the barn, the atmosphere is heavy but alive. The smell of old wood, dust, and hay mixes with something indefinable, a faint scent that hints at smoke or earth freshly turned. The rafters above creak under the weight of the years, and every gust of wind seems to carry whispers from the past. The lights flicker in places where no bulbs hang, shadows slip between hay bales, and on occasion, a cold hand brushes against a visitor. A silent reminder that Willow Bend Barn is a place where the living and the echoes of the past coexist in uneasy harmony. Cottonwood Barn, just beyond the outskirts of Fort Madison, stands as a crumbling relic of a bygone era, its timbers gray and splintered, its roof sagging under decades of neglect. At first glance, it appears no different from countless abandoned barns scattered across Iowa's countryside. Yet those who have ventured inside or lingered nearby tell a far different story. For nearly a century, the barn has been linked to unexplained phenomena: phantom hoofbeats echoing through empty stalls, footsteps pacing along decayed wooden corridors, and mysterious lights that flicker as though held by invisible hands. It is a place where the past seems unwilling to release its grip on the present. The barn was originally built in the late 1800s by the Cottonwood family, one of Fort Madison's early farming families. They constructed it as the centerpiece of a prosperous farm, housing livestock, storing feed, and sheltering equipment. The interior was spacious, with high beams and a wide hayloft that ran the length of the structure. Farmhands often worked long hours inside, tending to horses and cattle, repairing fences, and maintaining the barn itself. Life was hard, but the Cottonwoods thrived, and the barn became a hub of activity, a place filled with the sounds of hoofbeats, laughter, and the rhythm of daily labor. Tragedy struck in the early 1920s. Accounts vary, but the most commonly accepted version is that a fire broke out late one night. Some say it began in the hayloft, from a discarded lantern, while others suggest it was sparked by a malfunctioning stove in the adjoining farmhouse. The flames spread quickly through the dry timbers, engulfing a section of the barn. Several farmhands were trapped inside, and though neighbors rushed to help, not all could be saved. Horses and cattle perished in the blaze, their panicked cries echoing across the fields. The Cottonwood family rebuilt portions of the barn afterward, but the sense of unease never left the property. Even after the farm changed ownership, reports of strange occurrences persisted. Visitors frequently describe hearing the unmistakable sound of hooves striking the wooden floors. Though the stalls have long been empty, the rhythmic clatter of boots pacing the corridors often accompanies these phantom sounds, as though the farmhands themselves are still walking the paths they once knew so well. Doors swing open and shut on their own, and tools left hanging neatly on walls will sometimes be found scattered across the floor by morning. The barn is also known for inexplicable lights. In some accounts, faint lantern glows appear in the loft or behind walls, moving as if carried by unseen hands. Witnesses have seen these lights swing gently, vanish when approached, or flicker in rhythm with the sounds of ghostly activity. One evening, a photographer attempting to document the barn with long exposure shots noticed streaks of amber light cutting across the interior, moving in patterns that could not be explained by wind or reflection. The images captured forms that appeared to resemble figures standing near the loft or moving along the upper beams. Explorers who spend time inside Cottonwood Barn often describe an oppressive atmosphere, a heaviness that seems to press down from the rafters. Temperature fluctuations are sudden and intense, one moment warm and still, the next icy and biting, Many report a chill brushing across their skin, sometimes accompanied by the sensation of fingers grazing their arms or shoulders, though nothing is visibly present. The hayloft, in particular, is said to hold the most activity, with the sounds of footsteps, whispers, and the soft shuffle of animals echoing through the timbers. Paranormal investigators have documented these phenomena over the years, using audio recorders, cameras, and electromagnetic field meters. Recordings often pick up faint, indistinct voices, low murmurs that rise and fall, sometimes repeating words that investigators cannot understand. Cameras occasionally capture orbs of light or shadowy forms that appear to move with intent, defying explanation. EMF meters spike in certain areas of the barn, particularly near the loft and along the main corridor, indicating unseen presences. Local residents are quick to warn newcomers about the barn. Many avoid it entirely after dark, citing a sense of unease even from a distance. Teenagers and thrill-seekers drawn to the site often emerge pale and shaken, describing whispers calling out names, shadowy figures appearing among hay bales, and sudden gusts of cold air that seem to come from nowhere. Some claim that the spirits are not malevolent but restless, forever tied to the barn by the sudden and tragic deaths that occurred there. Others suggest that the lingering energy is protective, a spectral memory of a time when the barn was alive with work and care. Despite its dilapidated state, the structure itself seems stubbornly resilient. The wood groans under its own weight, the doors sag but remain hinged, and the loft, though worn, still holds hay and debris. Nature has slowly reclaimed the surrounding land, with weeds curling around fence posts and trees leaning over the barn as if guarding it. Yet, the building retains a palpable presence, drawing those who are sensitive to the paranormal and deterring those who sense the restless energy within. Stories of Cottonwood Barn are not limited to sounds and lights. Many visitors describe seeing fleeting shadows, sometimes humanoid, sometimes animal-like, flitting across the loft or between the stalls. Some report the outline of horses or cows, translucent and softly shimmering, moving with a lifelike grace before fading into the darkness. The sensation is often accompanied by the sound of breathing, snuffling, or the subtle stamping of hooves, creating the impression that the barn is alive in ways beyond the natural world. Cottonwood Barn remains a place of mystery, a space where history, tragedy, and the unexplained intertwine. The echoes of farmhands long gone, the phantom animals that once filled its stalls, and the flickering lights that defy explanation make it a sight that continues to captivate, terrify, and intrigue. Those who enter do so with caution, knowing that even in its quiet decay, the barn carries the memories of the past, and that past has not yet finished speaking. Prairie Mist Barn, located just outside Carroll, Iowa, has long been a place of quiet mystery and whispered stories. From the outside, it appears like any other century-old barn, its weathered wood gray from years of sun and wind, its roof sagging and covered in moss. But those who have ventured close, especially after dark, speak of a place alive with phenomena that cannot be explained. Shadowy figures near the hayloft, sudden cold spots that seem to follow visitors, phantom voices, and unexplained thuds have been reported for decades, giving the barn a reputation as one of the most haunted structures in the area. The barn was built in the late 1800s by the Benson family, early settlers who worked at the fertile plains surrounding Carroll. It was a large, sturdy structure designed to house horses, cattle, and tools essential to the farm's daily operations. The loft was spacious, stacked high with hay, and the lower level contained stalls, feed racks, and room for farmhands to work. For generations, the barn echoed with the sounds of labor hooves clopping on wooden floors, tools clanging, and voices calling across the stalls. It was the heart of the farm, a place where both life and work intertwined. But as the years passed, tragedy and misfortune began to touch the property. Livestock died unexpectedly, equipment disappeared, and strange accidents began to occur. By the 1920s, a series of unexplained incidents gave the barn a dark reputation. Neighbors whispered about the ghostly figure of a farmhand who had fallen from the hayloft. His death, sudden and shocking, leaving an imprint of sorrow that some believe lingered in the very beams of the structure. Others spoke of a young woman who had once helped care for the animals and died in a nearby farmhouse under mysterious circumstances. Her spirit rumored to drift into the barn, seeking comfort among the familiar hay and stalls. Visitors to Prairie Mist Barn have consistently reported seeing shadowy figures moving along the loft or behind the beams. These shapes are often described as human-like, tall and thin, their movements slow and deliberate. Some claim that the figures vanish when approached, as if aware of being observed. Others have glimpsed fleeting images of a figure crouching near a hay bale, only to disappear when they turn for a closer look. Many describe an immediate sense of unease, a feeling that they are not alone, even in the barn's emptiest corners. Cold spots are another common phenomenon. Walkers inside the barn frequently notice sudden drops in temperature, often localized and moving with them through the stalls and aisles. One visitor reported feeling a chill brush across the back of his neck, even as the sun shone through the open doors, and another said the air in the loft was so cold it made her breath visible, despite a warm summer evening. These cold spots are often accompanied by an inexplicable heaviness, a sensation that something unseen is pressing just beyond perception. Phantom voices have been reported for decades. People hear their names called softly, murmurs of indistinct words, or the echo of conversations that seem to come from empty corners. One longtime local recounted an evening when he was exploring the loft alone. A voice whispered a warning to step carefully, followed by the sound of something heavy dropping onto the floor. No object could be found afterward, yet the sound repeated as he moved from stall to stall, always just ahead or behind him, never leaving. Others report the voices rising and falling like distant conversations, only to vanish entirely when the barn falls silent. Unexplained thuds and creaks are a regular occurrence, often described as tools or beams falling without cause. In some accounts, these sounds appear rhythmic, as if a phantom hand is moving items deliberately through the space. Visitors describe hearing the slow, deliberate thump of a hammer, the sliding of a shovel across the floor, or the distant knock of a mallet. No wind or structural settling could account for the timing and precision of these noises, leading many to believe they are echoes of past labor or the restless movements of spirits unable to leave. Paranormal investigators have taken a particular interest in Prairie Mist Barn. Cameras have captured fleeting shadows darting across the loft. Audio devices have picked up murmurs and whispers in frequencies not normally audible, and EMF meters occasionally spike in isolated areas of the building. Many investigators report an overall sense of being watched, or of unseen presences moving alongside them as they explore. Despite the decades of attention, the barn remains unpredictable. Phenomena can appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly, leaving no tangible evidence behind. Locals have long maintained a respectful distance from the barn, particularly after dusk. Those who dare to explore are cautioned not to disturb the space unnecessarily, as the spirits are believed to be sensitive to intrusion. Yet the stories persist, growing richer with each retelling. Some claim the barn's hauntings are echoes of lives cut short or unfinished work, the residual energy of a place where life, labor, and sudden tragedy converged. Others believe that the spirits are tied to the animals once kept there, lingering in the form of shadowy shapes that resemble horses or cattle moving silently through empty stalls. Even in its decay, Prairie Mist Barn has a presence that commands attention. Its timbers creak under their own weight, the loft sags but holds its form, and the open doors reveal darkness filled with history and memory. On foggy nights, the shadows seem to stretch longer, the cold becomes sharper, and the whispered voices are clearer, as if the barn itself is remembering every footstep, every sound, and every soul that passed through its halls. Pine Hollow Barn, located in the quiet expanses of Des Moines County, Iowa, stands as a solemn monument to both human toil and tragedy. Weathered timbers and a sagging roof give the structure a haunting presence, especially against the backdrop of the open fields and dense tree lines that surround it. At first glance, it seems like a typical old barn, abandoned and worn by decades of weather, but those who venture nearer Inside speak of a different reality. Lights moving across the loft, unexplained sounds echoing through empty stalls, and the persistent sensation of being watched have earned Pine Hollow Barn a reputation as one of the region's most haunted locations. The barn was originally constructed in the early 1900s by the Thornton family, who had settled in Des Moines County seeking fertile land and a fresh start. Designed to accommodate livestock, hay storage, and farm equipment, the barn was expansive, with a high loft and multiple stalls that could hold horses, cows, and pigs. For years, it thrummed with activity. The sounds of work hoofbeats, tools clanging, and voices calling across the space, mixing with the smells of hay, leather, and earth. The Thornton family took pride in the barn, often inviting neighbors to help with harvests and livestock care, creating a sense of community centered on the structure. The first major incident that would stain the barn's history occurred in the late 1920s. A severe storm struck the area one summer night, bringing heavy rains and strong winds. The barn's roof weakened under the strain, and portions of the loft began to give way. Several farmhands were inside at the time, tending to hay and checking on livestock. The collapse was sudden and brutal. Some workers were trapped under falling beams, others injured by falling equipment, and a few did not survive. Witnesses recounted the chaos vividly: the sound of snapping timber, shouts for help, and the panicked cries of horses caught in the stalls. Though the barn was repaired afterward, many say the trauma of that night never left the site. Throughout the decades, Pine Hollow Barn has developed a reputation for the unexplained. Visitors often report seeing lights moving across the loft at night, though no lanterns or electricity exist to produce such illumination. These lights sometimes sway as if carried by an unseen hand or move methodically across the beams, tracing paths as if someone or something is working or searching in the dark. Photographers attempting to document the barn have captured streaks of light in long exposure shots, forming shapes that hint at human or animal presence. Some describe these orbs as amber or faintly blue, flickering in patterns that defy natural explanation. Unexplained sounds are another hallmark of the barn's haunting. The creak of wooden beams, footsteps pacing the loft, and the soft shuffle of hooves echo through the empty stalls. One visitor recounted standing in the middle of the barn, listening to a rhythmic clatter as though horses were moving along the floor above him, only to find the loft empty when he looked. Others have heard tools fall, chains clanging, and doors opening or slamming without any apparent cause. The sounds are often so vivid that witnesses swear someone or something is working among them, replaying the daily life that once filled the barn. The sensation of being watched is common for those who explore Pine Hollow Barn. Visitors describe an oppressive awareness, as if unseen eyes track their movements. Some feel a presence standing close behind them, only to turn and find empty space. Others report cold spots, sudden drops in temperature that seem to follow them through the building, particularly near the loft and stalls where the collapse occurred. These cold spots are often accompanied by the faint smell of hay mixed with a metallic temps, reminiscent of old blood or rusted equipment, further heightening the sense of unease. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to Pine Hollow Barn for decades. Cameras often capture shadows darting along the loft or moving between stalls, while audio recorders pick up whispers or low murmurs that cannot be explained. EMF meters sometimes spike in specific areas, particularly near the sections of the barn that collapsed in the 1930s. Investigators report feeling a mix of sorrow and vigilance in the air, as if the spirits of humans and animals alike remain tethered to the barn, replaying their final moments in the structure where they lived and died. The barn's animal history contributes to its eerie reputation. Horses, cows, and pigs that perished in accidents or during the collapse are said to have left imprints in the energy of the barn. Witnesses often describe the feeling of phantom hoofbeats following them, the brushing of invisible tails along their legs, or the sound of a distant whinny echoing across the loft. Some believe these spirits are protective, repeating familiar patterns of movement, while others think they are restless, unable to leave the place where they died. Local residents have long maintained a cautious respect for the barn. Children are warned not to wander near it after dark, and thrill seekers who explore the property frequently leave shaken. Accounts of lights flickering, sudden cold drafts, and the feeling of unseen eyes watching serve as cautionary tales, passed from generation to generation. The barn, though abandoned and rotting, commands attention, a silent reminder that the past is never fully gone. Even in its decayed state, Pine Hollow Barn retains an undeniable presence. The beams groan under their own weight, the doors hang crooked, and the loft remains intact despite years of wear. The shadows seem to move with the wind, and the air carries a faint scent of hay and earth mixed with something more elusive, a lingering trace of sorrow and energy from a century of human and animal life. On foggy nights, the structure takes on a spectral quality, the flickering lights and moving shadows transforming the barn into a space where the boundary between past and present seems to vanish. Riverbend Barn, quietly situated on the outskirts of Clinton, Iowa, stands as an aging testament to the area's agricultural past. Its weathered boards and rusted hinges tell the story of decades of exposure to wind, rain, and sun. Yet for locals and visitors alike, the barn holds a far more mysterious legacy than simple decay. Reports of glowing orbs hovering over the stalls, shadowy figures vanishing when approached, and faint cries or whispers drifting from the loft late at night have earned Riverbend Barn a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the region. Those who have stepped inside speak of a presence that lingers in the air, as if the history of the barn refuses to stay in the past. The barn was built in the early 1900s by the Callahan family, who had moved to Clinton, seeking fertile land and a place to establish their farm. Designed with a spacious loft and multiple stalls, the barn was intended to house horses, cows, and other livestock, while also storing hay and equipment. For years, it was a hub of activity, the sounds of animals, farmhands, and tools filling the space from sunrise to sunset. The loft, in particular, was used to store hay and grains, and its upper beams were frequently traversed by workers who maintained the barn and tended to the animals. Life was hard but steady, and the barn reflected the rhythms of the farm and the dedication of those who worked within its walls. Tragedy, however, began to leave its mark early in the barn's history. Accounts vary, but locals recall a series of incidents that began with unexplained accidents involving both humans and animals. Horses were found injured or dead under mysterious circumstances, and farmhands experienced strange sensations, sudden chills, or even the feeling of being watched. The loft, where much of the work was done, seemed particularly affected. The most notable incident occurred in the 1930s when a section of the loft collapsed unexpectedly. Some workers were injured, and the event left a lasting impression on the community, cementing Riverbend Barn's reputation as a place where danger and the unexplained seemed to converge. In the decades that followed, stories of paranormal activity became commonplace. Witnesses often described glowing orbs appearing over the stalls, drifting silently through the barn as if inspecting or guarding the space. These lights vary in color, sometimes appearing pale white, other times a warm amber, flickering in patterns that suggest intelligence or intent. Many claim that the orbs are drawn to certain parts of the barn, the loft, where the collapse occurred, and the central aisle between the stalls, moving slowly along the beams or hovering just above the ground. Photographers have captured these lights in long exposure images, revealing shapes that suggest movement and presence beyond the physical world. Shadowy figures are another frequent report. Visitors describe tall, indistinct shapes moving among the stalls or along the loft's edges, often disappearing the moment someone tries to approach. These apparitions are rarely seen clearly, more like impressions or silhouettes that linger at the edge of vision. Some witnesses describe a sense of awareness, feeling as if the figures are observing them or following their movements, only to vanish when attention is directed toward them. The combination of fleeting figures and glowing lights contributes to an overwhelming sense of being in a space that is not entirely of the living world. Faint cries and whispers are also commonly reported in the barn, particularly from the loft. Some visitors hear voices calling names softly, almost as if someone is trying to communicate from a distance. Others report hearing murmured conversations or low, indistinct sobs that rise and fall in volume. These sounds are often accompanied by other phenomena: creaking beams, sudden drafts, or the smell of hay mixed with an earthy, metallic taint, creating an immersive experience that is difficult to explain. Those who hear these cries often describe a feeling of profound sadness or lingering sorrow, as if the barn itself is replaying memories of past tragedies. Many paranormal investigators have visited Riverbend Barn, drawn by its history and the consistency of reported phenomena. Audio equipment often picks up whispers or murmurs not audible to the human ear at the time of recording. Cameras sometimes capture shadowy forms moving in the loft or between stalls. And EMF meters spike unpredictably in areas associated with past accidents. Investigators frequently note a pervasive sense of observation, a subtle pressure in the air that suggests unseen entities are present and aware of human activity. Despite repeated studies, the barn continues to produce unexplained results, maintaining an air of mystery that has only deepened over time. Local residents have passed down warnings about Riverbend Barn for generations. Children are told to avoid it after dark, and adults who venture near at night often do so with trepidation. Many of the barn's ghost stories focus on respect and caution rather than fear alone. The lights, shadows, and sounds are not always malevolent, but they are persistent reminders that the barn carries with it the weight of lives lived, and lost animals who once roamed the stalls, and workers whose labor is remembered long after their deaths. Even in its decaying state, Riverbend Barn remains imposing. Its weathered beams sag but hold fast, the roof leaks in places, and the loft continues to cast deep shadows across the stalls. The air is heavy with the scent of old wood, dust, and the faint, lingering aroma of hay. On misty nights, the barn appears to glow faintly from within, lights dancing across the loft and aisles in patterns that defy explanation. The shadows stretch and shift with the moonlight, giving the impression that the barn is alive in its own way, a living memory of the past that cannot be ignored. Maplewood Barn, nestled in the rolling fields of Dubuque County, Iowa, is a weathered structure that carries the weight of both history and legend. Its wooden siding is gray and splintered, its roof sagging from decades of exposure to wind, rain, and snow. Yet it continues to stand against time as a silent witness to the past. Locals speak in hushed tones of the spirit of a farmer who died in a tragic accident within its walls, a presence that continues to wander the barn long after his passing. Visitors often report doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering without any power, and an overwhelming sense that the barn itself is alive with unseen forces. The barn was built in the late 1800s by the Hargrove family, who had settled in Dubuque County, seeking fertile land and a fresh start. Designed as a multi-purpose farm structure, it housed horses, cattle, and storage for hay and equipment. Its loft was high and spacious, holding hay for winter months and providing access to the upper reaches of the barn for maintenance and work. During the day, the barn echoed with the rhythm of farm life, the stamping of hooves, the creak of wooden floors under the weight of labor, the clatter of tools, and the calls of farmhands coordinating chores. The Hargroves took pride in their farm and the barn, which became the heartbeat of their homestead. The tragedy that would come to define Maplewood Barn occurred in the early 1920s. Accounts tell of a young farmer, Thomas Hargrove, who had dedicated his life to the farm and the barn. One afternoon, while attempting to repair a weakened section of the loft, the wooden beams gave way beneath him. He fell from a considerable height, landing amidst the hay and equipment below. Despite the efforts of his family and neighbors, Thomas did not survive. The incident left a deep scar on the community, and whispers quickly spread of the barn being cursed or haunted. Some believed that his spirit, tied so closely to the barn he had built and worked in, could not find rest. In the decades following the accident, reports of paranormal activity began to surface. Visitors often described doors swinging open or slamming shut with no wind or human interference. Some have felt invisible hands brush against their shoulders or arms, accompanied by a sudden chill that seems to cling to the body. Others have noticed lights flickering in the loft or near the stalls, though no electrical systems are in use. These lights are often described as soft glows, moving slowly along the beams or across the floor, appearing and disappearing as if guided by an unseen presence. Shadowy figures are another common phenomenon at Maplewood Barn. Witnesses have described seeing a tall, thin figure moving between stalls or pacing along the loft, vanishing when approached. Many believe this is the spirit of Thomas Hargrove, forever tending to the barn he loved in life. Some have reported feeling the sense of being watched, particularly in the loft or near the main aisle of the barn. The sensation is not always menacing, but carries a weight of presence, a reminder that someone or something has not left the space entirely. Sounds of the past also seem to linger in Maplewood Barn. Visitors often hear the faint clatter of tools, footsteps echoing on wooden floors, or the soft creak of the loft under invisible weight. Occasionally, whispers are heard, indistinct but unmistakably human, as though carrying fragments of conversations long ago. The barn itself seems to hum with energy, the combination of sights, sounds, and sensations creating an immersive experience that can be both unsettling and fascinating. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Maplewood Barn, hoping to capture evidence of its supernatural activity. Audio devices often record low murmurs, disembodied footsteps, or faint cries, while cameras sometimes capture moving shadows or unexplained light anomalies in the loft. EMF meters register unpredictable spikes, especially in areas associated with the loft and the main aisle where Thomas Hargrove's accident occurred. Many investigators report a sense of awareness in the barn, as if they are not merely observing the space, but being observed themselves by a presence that remembers every detail of its former life. Locals maintain a respectful distance from the barn, especially after dusk. Stories of doors moving on their own, flickering lights, and unseen figures have been passed down through generations, often as cautionary tales. Children are warned not to wander near the property, and even thrill seekers approach with hesitation. Despite its dilapidated state, the barn continues to draw attention, the allure of its haunted reputation mingling with curiosity about its history and the life it once sustained. Nature has slowly reclaimed much of the surrounding land, with weeds and vines curling around the barn's foundation and trees bending over its roof like silent sentinels. Yet within its walls, the atmosphere is heavy with history. The scent of old wood and hay mingles with something indefinable, a lingering essence that seems to carry echoes of labor, loss, and memory. On foggy or moonlit nights, the barn appears almost alive, the flickering lights in the loft casting shifting shadows across the stalls, and the creaking beams seeming to respond to invisible footsteps. Maplewood Barn endures as a place where the past has not entirely faded. The doors that move on their own, the lights that dance without power, and the figures seen pacing the loft are all reminders that this structure is more than weathered wood and aged nails. It is a repository of memories, energy, and perhaps lingering life. Visitors who enter feel the weight of generations who worked, lived, and in some cases, died within its walls. The barn serves as a quiet testament to devotion, tragedy, and the mysteries that linger when life and history intertwine. Red Prairie Barn, standing quietly on the outskirts of Des Moines, Iowa, is a structure that tells a story far darker than its weathered timbers suggest. Built in the early 1900s, the barn was once the pride of the Peterson family, who cultivated the surrounding fields and maintained a small herd of cattle. Its wide, open loft and sturdy wooden beams were designed for practicality, yet over time, the barn has become known not for its utility, but for the inexplicable events that continue to draw attention from locals and visitors alike. Reports of phantom footsteps echoing through empty aisles, whispers that seem to rise from nowhere, and fleeting shadows gliding along the loft have earned Red Prairie Barn a reputation as one of the most haunted barns in the region. The tragedy at the heart of the barn's haunted reputation occurred in the 1920s. A young woman named Clara Peterson, daughter of the family, was said to be tending to hay in the loft when she lost her footing. Accounts various. Some say a loose board gave way, while others suggest a momentary slip while reaching for a hay bale, but the result was the same. Clara fell to the floor below, sustaining fatal injuries. Her sudden death devastated the family and the local community, and rumors quickly began to circulate that her spirit could not rest, forever bound to the barn where her life ended so abruptly. In the decades that followed, locals began reporting unexplained phenomena inside Red Prairie Barn. Phantom footsteps are among the most commonly experienced occurrences. Visitors often hear the unmistakable sound of someone walking along the wooden floors of the loft or pacing the aisles. Even when the barn is empty, the footsteps sometimes move deliberately, echoing off the walls as though the person is searching for something or retracing familiar paths. Those who have explored the barn at night describe the sensation of being followed, as though invisible eyes track every movement, and the footsteps occasionally quicken or pause in response to human presence. Whispers are another hallmark of the barn's activity. Many witnesses describe low murmurs, indistinct but unmistakably human, rising from the loft or from between the stalls. These sounds are often unintelligible, yet they carry a sense of urgency or longing, as if the barn itself is speaking fragments of Clara's life. Some visitors have reported hearing their own names whispered softly, and in some cases, the whispers are accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature, sending a chill through anyone present. The combination of sound, cold air, and the feeling of unseen attention creates a palpable tension that many find difficult to endure for long periods. Shadowy figures also appear frequently within Red Prairie Barn. Witnesses describe dark, human-shaped silhouettes that glide along the loft or move between the stalls, vanishing when approached. Some claim to have seen a figure near the spot where Clara fell, standing silently before fading into the darkness. Others report fleeting glimpses of movement in the corners of their vision, shadows that do not align with any natural source of light. These apparitions often leave behind an eerie sense of presence, reinforcing the idea that Clara's spiritor, perhaps the energy of the barn itself, remains tethered to the space. The barn's paranormal reputation has attracted investigators and curious visitors for decades. Audio devices frequently capture whispers and low murmurs, sometimes responding to questions in real time, while cameras have recorded shadowy movements and orbs of light in the loft. EMF meters occasionally spike in the areas associated with Clara's fall, particularly near the center of the barn, suggesting the presence of energy unaccounted for by normal sources. Investigators report a mix of sadness and tension within the barn, a lingering emotional residue from past events that seems to permeate the structure. Local residents maintain a cautious respect for Red Prairie Barn. Many warn children and newcomers to avoid it, especially after dark. Teenagers and thrill-seekers who venture inside often return shaken, recounting the sensation of being watched, the sound of footsteps following them, and the flickering shadows that vanish when attention is directed toward them. Stories passed down through generations have reinforced the idea that the barn is a place where life, death, and lingering energy intersect, and that it demands a quiet respect from those who enter. Despite its age and occasional decay, Red Prairie Barn remains structurally impressive. The loft still holds hay, and the wide aisles and stalls echo with the sounds of its history. The beams groan under their own weight, doors hang crooked but intact, and the floorboards creaked with the slightest pressure. Nature has begun to reclaim the exterior, with vines creeping along the siding and trees leaning protectively over the roof. Yet the interior remains a space where human memory and supernatural presence linger vividly. Visitors often report a combination of phenomena, where footsteps, whispers, and shadows overlap to create a fully immersive experience. Some claim the barn reacts to their presence, with the temperature dropping, the floorboards creaking, or lights flickering in tandem with movement. The sensory details, sounds, sights, and physical sensations combine to create an unmistakable impression of life lingering where none should exist. A memory made tangible in the form of paranormal activity. Red Prairie Barn endures as a testament to the past and its lingering spirits. The footsteps, whispers, and fleeting shadows are reminders that Clara Peterson's story is not entirely over, and that the space she once occupied continues to resonate with life, memory, and unresolved energy. Those who enter the barn find themselves in a place where history and the supernatural meet, where the boundary between past and present is thin, and where every creak, murmur, and movement reinforces the idea that Red Prairie Barn is more than an abandoned structure. It is a living memory of tragedy, devotion, and haunting presence. Lone Oak Barn, located in the quiet countryside of Cedar County, Iowa, is a structure that has stood for over a century, weathering the passage of time and the elements, yet never fading from the collective imagination of the locals. Its broad wooden beams and sagging roofs speak of a bygone era of farming and rural life. But what draws the most attention is not its age or architecture. It is the barn's long-standing reputation for paranormal activity. Witnesses have reported ghostly apparitions moving through the empty stalls, strange lights floating across the loft, the sound of chains dragging along the floor, and doors slamming shut with no visible cause. The barn's history and eerie phenomena have combined to make it one of Cedar County's most mysterious and unsettling locations. The barn was constructed in the early 1900s by the Reynolds family, who were among the first settlers in the area. Built as a multi-purpose structure, it was designed to house livestock, store hay, and provide space for tools and equipment. Its loft, accessible by a sturdy staircase, was used primarily for hay storage, while the lower level contained stalls for horses and cattle. For decades, the barn echoed with the sounds of everyday farm life: hoofbeats on wooden floors, the clatter of equipment, and the voices of farmers calling out to one another as they worked. The Reynolds family took great pride in the barn, viewing it as the heart of their property and a symbol of their hard work and dedication. Tragedy struck the barn several decades after its construction. Accounts vary, but it is said that a serious accident occurred involving one of the farmhands. While tending to the animals or moving equipment in the loft, the man fell, sustaining fatal injuries. Shortly afterward, livestock reportedly died under unexplained circumstances. Adding to the growing sense that the barn was somehow cursed, local legend began to take shape, telling stories of ghostly presences and unnatural events that seemed to have roots in the barn's tragic history. Over time, these tales became intertwined with the farm's legacy, making Lone Oak Barn a focal point of local folklore and a source of fascination for thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. Among the most frequently reported phenomena at Lone Oak Barn are ghostly apparitions. Witnesses describe human-like shapes moving between the stalls or along the loft, often vanishing when approached. Some claim to see figures standing silently in corners, only to disappear when they blink or turn their heads. These sightings are accompanied by a strong sense of presence, an almost tangible feeling that someone or something is observing the living. Visitors have reported that the apparitions sometimes appear to mimic the movements of past farmhands, repeating familiar tasks as if continuing their work from beyond the grave. Strange lights are another hallmark of Lone Oak Barn's haunting. Floating orbs, flickering lantern-like glows, and unexplained illumination often appear above the stalls or drift through the loft. These lights are said to move with intelligence, hovering in place, shifting direction, or following visitors as they explore the barn. Photographers have attempted to capture the phenomena using long exposure shots, often revealing shapes or streaks of light that seem to defy natural explanation. The lights add an otherworldly quality to the barn, transforming ordinary wooden beams and hay bales into a scene that feels suspended between the physical world and the unknown. Unusual sounds are also common inside the barn. Visitors report the dragging of chains along the floor, the distant clatter of tools, and doors opening or slamming with no wind or human intervention. These sounds are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature or a feeling of heaviness, as if the air itself carries the memory of past events. One frequent report involves chains rattling across empty stalls, echoing off the walls with a hollow, metallic sound, as though livestock or farmhands from long ago are still moving unseen within the structure. Such auditory phenomena have been captured in audio recordings during paranormal investigations, though their source remains elusive. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Lone Oak Barn, seeking to understand its mysterious activity. EMF meters often spike in specific areas, particularly near the loft and the main aisles, while cameras occasionally record shadows that move independently of any person present. Audio devices pick up whispers, distant footsteps, and the unmistakable sound of chains dragging across wooden floors. Investigators frequently note a heavy, oppressive energy inside the barn, as if the events of the past continue to echo in the present, shaping the atmosphere and influencing those who enter. Local residents have maintained a cautious respect for Lone Oak Barn over the years. Children are warned not to play near it after dark, and even adults approach with hesitation. While some thrill-seekers venture into the barn for a closer look, many report an intense, almost suffocating awareness of being watched. The combination of lights, apparitions, and sounds has created a persistent aura of mystery. Ensuring that the barn is more than just a relic of rural life, it is a place where the past lingers in palpable ways. Nature has slowly begun to reclaim the property surrounding Lone Oak Barn. Weeds and tall grasses weave around the foundation, vines creep along the siding, and trees bend over the roof as though guarding it. Yet inside, the barn remains remarkably intact. The loft still holds remnants of hay, and the stalls echo with the memory of horses and cattle that once occupied them. The scent of old wood, dust, and hay hangs in the air, mingling with something intangible, sense of history, labor, and lingering spirits. For those who enter Lone Oak Barn, the experience is often overwhelming. The barn feels alive in ways that defy explanation, a place where the living and the unseen coexist. Visitors leave with a sense of having encountered something beyond the ordinary, a direct connection to the history and memories that continue to inhabit the space. Whispering Pines Barn, nestled in the serene fields outside Iowa Falls, Iowa, is a structure steeped in history and enveloped in eerie legend. Weathered wooden siding, a sagging roof, and creaking beams speak to the barn's age, but it is not simply the passage of time that draws attention. Locals tell stories of the barn being haunted by the spirits of children who perished nearby decades ago. Visitors have reported faint giggles echoing through empty aisles, lights moving mysteriously across the loft, and an unsettling sensation of being followed as they walk among the stalls. The barn's tragic history and continued paranormal activity have made it a focal point for those intrigued by the supernatural. Constructed in the early 1900s, Whispering Pines Barn was originally part of a thriving family farm. Its loft was high and spacious, designed to store hay and feed, while the lower stalls housed horses, cattle, and other livestock. The barn was the heart of farm life, filled with the sounds of labor hooves clattering on wooden floors, tools striking metal, and voices calling across the space as workers coordinated chores. The barn was a hub of activity, not only for the family who owned it, but for neighbors and hired help who often came to assist during harvests and calving seasons. Tragedy touched the property early in its history. Local accounts tell of a nearby farmhouse where several children lost their lives in a fire. The cause of the fire remains uncertain, with rumors of accidental ignition from a lantern or stove, but the result was devastating. The children's lives were cut short, and their presence, many believe, lingered long after the flames were extinguished. Soon after the incident, those who approached or entered Whispering Pines Barn began to report strange occurrences. Soft giggles echoing through the loft, lights appearing and drifting along the beams, and the uncanny feeling of unseen eyes following them as they moved through the aisles. The sounds associated with Whispering Pines Barn are among the most frequently reported. Visitors often hear faint, playful giggles that seem to come from nowhere, sometimes rising and falling as if children were moving throughout the barn. Others have reported whispers, unintelligible but unmistakably human, drifting from the loft or from between stalls. These sounds often accompany sudden drops in temperature, giving a chilling quality to the auditory experiences. The combination of laughter, whispers, and cold air creates an atmosphere that is both unnerving and strangely poignant, a lingering echo of lives once lived. Unexplained lights are another hallmark of the barn's hauntings. Witnesses describe soft glows floating across the loft or drifting down the aisles, appearing to move with intention. The lights vary in color, sometimes pale white, other times amber or bluish, and they often appear at night when the barn is otherwise dark. Some visitors have reported the lights flickering or following them as they explore, vanishing the moment they are directly observed. Photographers and paranormal investigators who have attempted to document these phenomena often capture streaks of light or orbs that move independently of any natural source, lending further credence to the barn's eerie reputation. The sensation of being followed is a common experience for those entering Whispering Pines barn. Visitors describe an oppressive awareness, the feeling that unseen eyes are tracking their movements. Some report a light brush against their arms or shoulders, while others experience footsteps echoing behind them when they are alone. These experiences are often disorienting, heightening the sense that the barn itself is alive in some intangible way, populated by the lingering presence of the children who once lived nearby. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Whispering Pines barn, hoping to understand its mysterious activity. Audio devices frequently record whispers and faint giggles, while cameras sometimes capture shadowy shapes or orbs moving across the loft. EMF meters occasionally spike without explanation, particularly near the stalls where the sounds are most commonly reported. Investigators often comment on the barn's heavy energy, a mixture of sadness, innocence, and lingering attachment that seems to permeate the entire structure. Many leave with the impression that the children's spirits are not malevolent, but are instead replaying fragments of their lives, frozen in time within the walls of the barn. Local residents maintain a cautious respect for Whispering Pines barn. Children are warned not to play near it after dark, and even adults approach with a sense of hesitation. Stories passed down over generations emphasize both the tragedy and the mystery of the barn, serving as both warning and reminder of lives lost too soon. While the structure is abandoned and slowly succumbing to age, the memories and energy tied to it remain vibrant, creating a palpable connection between past and present. Nature has begun to reclaim the land around the barn. Vines curl around the foundation, weeds grow through the floorboards, and trees lean over the roof as though protecting the site. Inside, however, the barn remains remarkably intact. Hay remnants scatter the loft, the stalls echo with phantom movements, and the wooden beams groan softly under their own weight. The air carries the smell of old wood, dust, and hay, mingling with a subtle, almost intangible trace of sorrow and life that feels alive to those who enter. For visitors, the experience of Whispering Pines barn is immersive and unforgettable. The faint giggles, moving lights, and feelings of being followed combine to create a hauntingly vivid encounter. The barn seems to bridge the living world and the supernatural, offering a direct connection to the children whose lives ended tragically nearby. Each step taken in the barn reinforces the presence of past events, a reminder that the echoes of life and death can endure long after the physical structures remain. Black River Barn, located on the outskirts of Muscatine, Iowa, is a weathered structure whose wooden beams and sagging roof have withstood the passage of time, storms, and decades of farming life, while its exterior tells the story of age and use. It is the barn's reputation for paranormal activity that draws the most attention. Locals speak of a restless spirit, a former stable hand, who died under mysterious circumstances, still haunting the barn. Visitors report hearing whispering voices that seem to rise from nowhere, sudden cold drafts that chill to the bone, and shadows darting across empty stalls, vanishing the instant anyone tries to follow them. Over the years, the combination of history, tragedy, and unexplained phenomena has turned Black River Barn into one of Muscatine's most eerie landmarks. The barn was constructed in the early 1900s by the Carter family, who established a modest farm along the banks of the nearby river. It was designed as a multifunctional building, housing horses, cows, and various farm tools. Its loft, supported by thick wooden beams, held hay for the winter months, while the lower level contained stalls for livestock. For decades, the barn was a hub of activity. The stable hand, whose spirit is now said to haunt the structure, spent long hours tending to the animals, feeding them, cleaning stalls, and ensuring that the loft was stocked with fresh hay. His presence was integral to the daily rhythm of the farm, and his dedication was well known among family and neighbors alike. Tragedy struck the barn during the 1930s. The exact circumstances remain unclear, but it is widely believed that the stable hand suffered a fatal accident while performing his duties in the loft. Some accounts suggest he fell while moving hay, while others hint at a structural collapse or a misstep on the ladder leading to the upper level. His death was sudden and violent, leaving a lingering shock in the small farming community. Soon after, neighbors began reporting strange occurrences at the barn. Doors would open or close on their own. Cold drafts swept through the aisles without warning, and shadows seemed to move along the walls and beams. Over time, the stories solidified into the belief that the stable hand's spirit had never left, tied to the barn he had cared for in life. Visitors to Black River Barn often describe hearing whispering voices that cannot be traced to any source. These whispers are low and indistinct, sometimes rising and falling in tone, as if carrying fragments of conversations from the past. Occasionally, the voices seem to call out to specific visitors, repeating names or phrases softly, almost like echoes of memory lingering in the air. The whispers often coincide with sudden cold drafts that move through the barn, chilling those present even on warm days. Many who have experienced these phenomena report a sense of being watched, a feeling that unseen eyes are tracking their movements as they walk among the stalls. Shadows are another recurring feature of the barn's haunted reputation. Witnesses often describe fleeting, human-shaped silhouettes darting across the empty aisles or along the loft. These shadows appear to move with intention, pausing at times before vanishing, as if aware of the living who enter the barn. Some claim to see figures perched on the loft beams, staring silently before dissolving into darkness. The combination of whispers, cold drafts, and moving shadows creates an atmosphere that is both oppressive and mysterious, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who spends time inside the barn. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Black River Barn, attempting to capture evidence of its unusual activity. Audio devices frequently pick up whispers, murmurs, and the faint creaking of unseen footsteps, while cameras have recorded shadows moving across stalls or drifting along the loft. EMF meters often spike in specific areas of the barn, particularly near the loft and the central aisle, where the stable hand was known to spend most of his time. Investigators consistently report an overwhelming sense of presence, a mixture of sadness, vigilance, and lingering attachment, as if the spirit remains tethered to the barn by duty or unresolved memories. Local residents maintain a cautious respect for the barn. Children are warned not to wander near it after dark, and even adults who venture close often approach with hesitation. While some thrill-seekers enter the barn seeking a first-hand encounter, many leave shaken by the intensity of the atmosphere. Stories of whispering voices, moving shadows, and cold drafts have persisted for decades, becoming a fixture of Muscatine folklore and a reminder that the past refuses to remain silent. Despite its age and weathered condition, Black River Barn remains structurally impressive. Its wooden beams still hold the loft above, and the stalls remain intact, though empty. The floorboards creaked with the slightest weight, and the doors hang slightly crooked on their hinges. The smell of old wood, dust, and hay lingers in the air, mixing with a subtle chill that seems almost unnatural. On misty or moonlit nights, the barn takes on an even more haunting appearance, with shadows stretching across the aisles and the loft glowing faintly in areas where no light should exist. For visitors, the experience of Black River Barn is immersive. The whispers, shadows, and sudden cold drafts combine to create a sense of presence that is both unsettling and captivating. The barn seems to be alive with memory, a place where the spirit of the stable hand continues to move through the space he once tended so diligently. Each sound, each flicker of movement, and each chill in the air reinforces the notion that this is a location where the living and the spectral coexist, where the echoes of the past refuse to fade entirely. Cornfield Barn, located in the expansive farmland of Cedar Rapids County, Iowa, is a structure that seems ordinary at first glance. Weathered wooden siding, a slightly sagging roof, and a loft filled with decades of dust and hay. Yet, those who venture near its doors quickly realize that Cornfield Barn is far from ordinary. Over the years, it has developed a reputation for strange, flickering lights, unexplained footsteps, and shadows that move along the rafters and hay bales, leaving an unsettling impression that something unseen is watching every visitor. Locals speak of the barn with a mixture of awe and caution, aware that the history it carries is tied to both tragedy and mystery. The barn was built in the early 1900s by the McAllister family, who had recently settled in the fertile countryside. Intended as a multi-purpose farm structure, it housed livestock, stored hay, and provided space for tools and equipment. Its loft was expansive, designed to hold enough hay to sustain the farm animals through harsh winters, while the lower level contained stalls for horses, cattle, and smaller livestock. For decades, the barn was alive with activity. The clatter of hooves on wooden floors, the sound of shovels striking metal and wood, and the voices of farmers and helpers calling across the aisles. Its practical purpose was intertwined with daily life, making it the heartbeat of the McAllister farm. Stories of strange phenomena began to circulate decades later, though the origins are unclear. Some believe the barn's unusual activity is tied to accidents that occurred there over the years, including falls from the loft, mishaps with tools, and even livestock injuries that left a mark on the property's history. Others suggest that the barn's energy has absorbed the countless hours of labor, worry, and human presence, leaving behind residual echoes that manifest in mysterious ways. Visitors report a mixture of sensory experiences that defy explanation, from fleeting lights to footsteps with no source, creating an atmosphere both unnerving and captivating. The most common phenomenon reported at Cornfield Barn is the appearance of strange, flickering lights. Witnesses often describe soft glows emanating from the loft or moving along the aisles, sometimes darting across hay bales or along the wooden beams. The lights vary in intensity and color, from pale white to amber, and they frequently appear in areas where no electricity is present. Photographers and paranormal investigators have captured images of orbs and streaks of light, sometimes revealing patterns that suggest the lights move with purpose. Many visitors describe the lights as observing them, shifting or flickering in response to their movements, further heightening the sense that the barn itself is alive with unseen energy. Unexplained footsteps are another hallmark of the barn's haunted reputation. Visitors often hear the unmistakable sound of someone walking along the loft or across the lower level. Despite being completely alone, the steps sometimes move deliberately, pacing back and forth as if retracing familiar paths, or echo in rhythm with visitors' own movements. At times, the footsteps are accompanied by soft creaks of the floorboards, the distant clatter of tools, or the subtle shifting of hay bales, creating an immersive experience that feels both tangible and supernatural. Those who have ventured inside report a growing sense of unease, as if unseen eyes are following their every step, waiting, watching, and remaining just out of sight. Shadows moving along the rafters and hay bales further reinforce the barn's eerie atmosphere. Witnesses describe shapes that appear human or vaguely humanoid, gliding silently across the loft or slipping along the edges of the stalls. These shadows vanish the instant they are approached, leaving behind only the faintest trace of movement or a lingering chill in the air. Some visitors report the shadows appearing to mimic tasks once performed in the barn, such as moving hay or checking stalls, as if repeating routines long after the humans who once occupied the space have departed. The combination of light, sound, and shadow creates an environment that is immersive and often disorienting, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who steps inside. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Cornfield Barn, hoping to document its mysterious activity. Audio devices frequently record footsteps, soft murmurs, or even indistinct whispers, while cameras capture shadows or flickering lights moving independently of any natural source. EMF meters occasionally spike without explanation, particularly near the loft and in the central aisles. Investigators often note a heavy, almost palpable energy inside the barn, a mixture of residual labor, tragedy, and the sense of being observed. Many describe a feeling of reverence, as if the barn itself demands respect and careful attention. Local residents maintain a cautious respect for the barn, warning children and visitors not to venture inside after dark. Even those who explore the barn during the day report an intense awareness of unseen presences, a sensation that has persisted across generations. The barn's reputation for haunting is not only a point of curiosity but a reminder of the lives and labor that have passed through its beams, a lingering connection between past and present. Nature has slowly reclaimed much of the barn's exterior. Vines curl around the foundation, weeds sprout through cracks in the floorboards, and trees lean protectively over the roof. Yet the interior remains remarkably intact, preserving the wooden beams, stalls, and loft that carry echoes of a century of activity. The smell of old wood, hay, and dust fills the air, mingling with something intangible, a quiet sense of history and presence that is felt rather than seen. Visitors to Cornfield Barn describe a hauntingly immersive experience. The flickering lights, unexplained footsteps, and moving shadows combine to create a feeling of being observed by something beyond the physical. Each step taken within the barn reinforces the presence of history and unseen activity, reminding visitors that the space is more than just an abandoned structure. Cornfield Barn continues to be a place where memory, energy, and perhaps spirit coexist, a living testament to the lives and labor that shaped it, and the lingering presence that refuses to fade. Silver Pines Barn, located in the rolling fields of Iowa County, Iowa, is a structure whose weathered timbers and faded siding conceal a dark and tragic history. Built in the early 1900s, the barn once served as the heart of a thriving farm, with its spacious loft storing hay and its stalls housing horses, cows, and other livestock. Yet, beneath its rustic charm lies a reputation steeped in sorrow and mystery. Local legend claims that the barn is haunted by the spirit of a farmer who took his own life after losing his property to debt. Since then, visitors have reported faint cries echoing through the empty aisles, doors opening and closing without explanation, and shadowy figures moving silently across the loft. The barn stands today not only as a relic of rural life, but as a chilling reminder of despair and lingering spirits. The tragedy at Silver Pines Barn is said to have occurred during the Great Depression, a time when many farmers struggled to keep their land. The man who built and tended the farm, known to locals as Samuel Harding, was described as diligent, proud, and deeply connected to his land. He worked tirelessly to maintain his crops and livestock, but financial hardship and misfortune gradually wore him down. Eventually, Samuel lost his farm, unable to repay debts or secure a new livelihood. Heartbroken and despairing, he reportedly hanged himself in the barn, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow that would haunt the property for decades. Soon after Samuel's death, locals began noticing unusual occurrences in and around the barn. Whispered accounts described faint cries echoing through the loft and aisles, sounds that seemed to rise from nowhere and vanish just as suddenly. Some people reported doors swinging open or slamming shut without wind or human intervention, while others claimed to see shadowy figures moving among the hay bales or standing silently in the loft, disappearing when approached. Over the years, these reports became consistent enough to solidify the barn's reputation as a place where the past refuses to rest, and where Samuel's spirit may still linger, bound to the place of his final despair. The auditory phenomena associated with Silver Pines Barn are among the most unsettling experiences reported by visitors. Many recount hearing soft, sorrowful cries that seem almost human in nature, echoing from the loft as though the barn itself is mourning. These sounds are often accompanied by the creak of floorboards, the sudden thud of a door, or the faint scraping of a tool against wood. In some cases, the cries appear to respond to the presence of humans, growing louder or shifting direction as if drawing attention or warning intruders. Those who have explored the barn report that the sounds evoke an emotional response, a mix of fear and sadness that lingers long after leaving the structure. Visual phenomena are also frequently reported. Shadowy figures are said to move along the loft and between the stalls, often disappearing the moment they are directly observed. Witnesses describe shapes that appear vaguely human, sometimes standing silently before fading into darkness, sometimes gliding across the loft as though retracing familiar tasks. Some claim to see a tall, thin figure near the center of the barn, a spectral presence that seems to embody the memory of Samuel Harding himself. These shadows are not always malevolent in appearance, but their sudden presence and unexplained movements create an undeniable sense of unease for anyone inside the barn. Doors that open and close on their own are another signature of the barn's haunting. Visitors often find doors swinging in the absence of wind or human interference, or closing with a sharp slam after remaining open for hours. These occurrences are reported throughout the barn, from the main aisles to the loft, and are often accompanied by subtle shifts in temperature, sudden chill that seems to sweep through the space, heightening the feeling of presence. Many who have spent time inside Silver Pine's barn describe a sensation of being observed, as though invisible eyes follow their every step. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Silver Pine's barn, hoping to document its mysterious activity. Audio devices frequently capture faint cries, whispers, or indistinct voices that do not correspond to any human source. Cameras sometimes record shadows darting across the loft or drifting through aisles, while EMF meters occasionally spike without explanation. Investigators often describe the energy inside the barn as heavy and sorrowful, filled with echoes of despair and lingering attachment. Some theorize that Samuel's intense emotional state at the time of his death may have left an imprint on the structure, creating a form of residual haunting that persists through time. Local residents maintain a cautious respect for the barn. Children are warned to avoid it, especially after dark, and adults often approach with hesitation. Those who venture inside frequently report a mix of fear and fascination, drawn to the history and haunted reputation of the structure. The stories of cries, shadowy figures, and doors moving on their own have persisted through generations, forming a local lore that is as compelling as it is chilling. Despite its age and partial decay, Silver Pine's barn remains remarkably intact. Its loft still holds remnants of hay, and the stalls echo with the memory of livestock that once filled them. The smell of old wood and dust mingles with an intangible sense of sorrow, an atmosphere that visitors feel rather than see. On foggy or moonlit nights, the barn takes on an almost surreal quality, shadows stretching across the loft and aisles, lending a spectral presence to the structure itself. Visitors to Silver Pine's barn often describe the experience as immersive and unforgettable. The cries, the shadows, the doors moving without explanation all combine to create a sense that the barn is alive with memory and spirit. Each step inside reinforces the connection between the present and the past, a reminder that the emotions and tragedies of those who lived and died there continue to resonate. Autumn Hollow Barn, located in the rural expanse of Des Moines County, Iowa, is a structure that exudes both history and mystery. Weathered wooden beams, a sagging roof, and the faint scent of hay mark its exterior. But those who have ventured inside know that it is far more than a simple abandoned barn. Over the years, visitors have reported sightings of spectral animals moving silently through empty stalls, ghostly figures drifting across lofts, and flickering lights that seem to appear without any natural source. Some claim to have glimpsed apparitions dressed in old farming clothing, as though the barn itself preserves echoes of a bygone era. Autumn Hollow Barn has become a place where the past and present converge, leaving anyone who enters with a chilling yet mesmerizing experience. Constructed in the early 1900s by the Larson family, Autumn Hollow Barn was once a central hub of agricultural life. Its loft was filled with hay to feed livestock, while the lower level contained stalls for horses, cattle, and other animals. The barn was a place of constant activity, with the Larson family and hired hands working from dawn until dusk. Footsteps echoed across wooden floors, tools clattered in the stalls, and the smell of hay, sweat, and earth permeated the space. The barn was not just a building, it was the lifeblood of the farm, carrying the rhythm, labor, and energy of its occupants. The origins of the barn's haunted reputation trace back decades. Stories circulate of accidents and sudden deaths occurring on the property, as well as of livestock disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Locals began speaking in hushed tones of ghostly presences that lingered long after life had left the barn. It was said that the spirits of both humans and animals refused to depart, bound to the space they had once inhabited. The combination of history, tragedy, and daily labor seems to have left an enduring imprint, transforming Autumn Hollow Barn from a functioning agricultural structure into a focal point of supernatural curiosity. Visitors frequently report spectral animals as one of the most startling phenomena. Shadows resembling horses, cows, and even chickens are said to move silently through the empty stalls, sometimes appearing to graze or wander as if carrying on a routine from decades past. These apparitions are often fleeting, vanishing when approached, but their presence is unmistakable to those who witness them. Many describe the sensation of hearing soft hoofbeats on the loft floor or the distant lowing of cattle when no animals are present. The combination of sound and sight creates an immersive experience, making the barn feel alive with the memory of its former occupants. Ghostly figures are another common occurrence. Visitors have reported seeing human-shaped shadows moving across the loft and aisles, sometimes pausing in corners or near hay bales before disappearing into darkness. Some of these figures are described as wearing old farming clothing, wide-brimmed hats, suspenders, long dresses, and aprons, as if frozen in time. The figures often appear to be engaged in familiar farm tasks, such as tending to animals or moving hay, replaying fragments of life long past. Witnesses frequently describe an overwhelming sense of presence, a feeling that the barn is aware of their movements, silently observing with an energy that is both solemn and unsettling. Flickering lights are yet another hallmark of Autumn Hollow Barn. Many report small glows appearing in the loft or drifting along the stalls, often shifting position as visitors explore. The lights are said to vary in color and intensity, from soft white or amber to pale blue, and they often appear in places where no natural light or electricity exists. Cameras and long-exposure photography have occasionally captured orbs and streaks of light, adding to the barn's mystique. Some witnesses describe the lights as moving with intelligence, following them or responding to their actions, further reinforcing the sense of being observed. Sounds accompany the visual phenomena, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. Footsteps on loft boards, faint whispers, and the rustling of hay often occur with no visible source. Doors sometimes open and close on their own, creating sudden noises that echo throughout the barn. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature, a chilling contrast to otherwise warm days, often coinciding with the appearance of shadows or lights. The combination of auditory, visual, and sensory experiences makes the barn feel like a living entity, carrying the memories and energy of its long-departed inhabitants. Paranormal investigators have explored Autumn Hollow Barn extensively, hoping to capture evidence of its strange activity. EMF meters occasionally spike near the loft and central aisles, while cameras sometimes record fleeting shadows or moving lights. Audio devices have picked up faint whispers, indistinct murmurs, and the soft sound of hooves or footsteps when no one else is present. Investigators describe the energy inside the barn as both heavy and reverent, filled with echoes of labor, life, and lingering presence. Many leave with the impression that the spirits are not malevolent, but rather replaying fragments of their lives, tethered to a space they once occupied with purpose and care. Local residents continue to treat Autumn Hollow Barn with caution. Children are warned to stay away after dark, and even adults approach the structure carefully. While some explore the barn out of curiosity or for paranormal investigation, many leave with a heightened awareness of unseen presences. Tales of spectral animals, ghostly figures, and flickering lights have endured through generations, forming a local lore that emphasizes both the fascination and the respect owed to the barn. Despite its age and the slow encroachment of nature, Autumn Hollow Barn remains structurally intact. Its wooden beams, loft, and stalls preserve the physical space of its past, while the scent of hay, dust, and old wood mingles with an intangible aura of memory. On misty or moonlit nights, shadows stretch across aisles, and faint lights illuminate corners, creating a scene that feels both historic and supernatural. Golden Harvest Barn, situated in the fertile fields of Story County, Iowa, is a structure that has stood for over a century, bearing witness to generations of farming life. Its weathered wooden siding, large central loft, and empty stalls suggest a bygone era. Yet for many, the barn is far from abandoned. Local lore tells of multiple spirits lingering within its walls, including former farm workers and the animals they once tended. Visitors have reported flickering lights, sudden cold spots, shadowy figures moving silently along the rafters and aisles, and whispers carried on the wind sounds and sensations that persist long after leaving the property. The barn is not only a monument to agricultural history, but also a focal point for the unexplained, drawing those who are curious about the intersection of memory, tragedy, and the supernatural. Built in the early 1900s, Golden Harvest Barn was originally the centerpiece of a thriving farm. Its loft was stacked high with hay to sustain livestock through harsh winters, while the lower level contained stalls for horses, cows, and other animals. Farmers and hired hands spent countless hours within its walls, tending to the animals, repairing equipment, and preparing the land for planting. The sounds of clattering hooves, tools striking metal, and voices calling across the barn were once the heartbeat of daily farm life. Over time, however, tragedy and misfortune touched the property. Accounts tell of accidents involving workers, sudden livestock deaths, and other untimely events that may have contributed to the lingering energy reported today. Witnesses frequently describe ghostly lights as one of the most striking phenomena at Golden Harvest Barn. These flickering glows often appear in the loft or along the main aisles, moving as if with intention. They range from soft, white, and amber to faint bluish hues, and appear in areas where no electricity or natural light could be present. Visitors often report that the lights seem to follow them, retreat when approached, or illuminate objects in corners that would otherwise remain in shadow. Photographers and paranormal investigators have captured orbs and streaks of light in long exposure images, further cementing the barn's reputation for mysterious activity. Cold spots are another hallmark of the haunting. Visitors frequently report sudden drops in temperature that are localized and inexplicable, often occurring near areas where ghostly lights appear or shadowy forms are observed. These chilling sensations seem to follow visitors as they move through the aisles, adding a physical layer to the already unsettling atmosphere. Many describe the cold as seeping into their bones, accompanied by a feeling of being watched or of unseen presences moving nearby. Shadowy forms are perhaps the most unnerving aspect of the barn's hauntings. Witnesses describe human-shaped figures gliding silently along the loft or standing near stalls, disappearing when directly observed. Some of these apparitions are believed to be the spirits of former farm workers, replaying tasks from their lives, such as moving hay, tending to animals, or inspecting tools. Others appear to be animal shapes, including fleeting silhouettes of horses or cows, moving along the stalls or loft as if carrying out routines long past. The shadows are unpredictable yet purposeful, creating an environment where the living are acutely aware of the past lingering just out of sight. Whispers, carried on the wind, are a consistent and chilling part of the experience. Visitors report hearing soft voices, sometimes indistinct murmurs, sometimes words that seem to call their names or speak in phrases that cannot be fully understood. The whispers often coincide with other phenomena, flickering lights, cold spots, or shadows, creating a multi-sensory experience that is immersive and difficult to ignore. Some visitors describe a sense of being guided or observed, as though the barn's spirits are both present and aware of their presence. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Golden Harvest Barn, attempting to document the variety of reported activity. Audio devices have recorded whispers, murmurs, and faint sounds of footsteps where no living person is present. Cameras sometimes capture shadows moving across lofts or stalls, while EMF meters spike without explanation. Investigators often describe the energy as layered and complex, a mixture of labor, life, and lingering tragedy, suggesting multiple presences may coexist within the barn. Many leave with the impression that these spirits are not merely residual but aware, tethered to the barn by memory, duty, or unfinished business. Local residents treat Golden Harvest Barn with cautious respect. Children are warned to avoid it, particularly at night, while adults approach carefully, aware of the structure's haunted reputation. While some thrill-seekers explore the barn in search of a first-hand encounter, many leave with a heightened sense of awareness and unease. Tales of flickering lights, cold spots, shadowy forms, and whispers have persisted through generations, blending folklore, history, and personal testimony into a tapestry that continues to intrigue both locals and visitors alike. Despite its age and partial decay, Golden Harvest Barn remains structurally impressive. Its loft still holds remnants of old hay. The stalls remain intact, and the wooden beams support the roof as they have for over a century. The smell of aged wood, dust, and hay permeates the interior, mingling with an almost tangible sense of history and presence. On misty evenings or under the light of a full moon, shadows stretch across the aisles, lights flicker in unexplainable ways, and whispers drift through the open spaces, transforming the barn into a living monument to the lives that once moved within it. Visitors to Golden Harvest Barn often describe the experience as immersive and unforgettable. The flickering lights, cold spots, shadows, and whispers combine to create a sense of history and the supernatural merging. The barn is more than an abandoned structure. It is a place where the memories of labor, life, and untimely deaths converge with the present, leaving an indelible impression. Every step, every sound, and every flicker of light reinforces the barn's haunting presence, creating a connection between those who enter and the spirits that continue to linger. There you have it, 25 haunted barns in Iowa filled with unseen forces. From century-old farmsteads to abandoned rural structures, these barns are more than buildings. They are vessels of history, tragedy, and restless spirits. Flickering lights, shadowy figures, and whispers in the rafters remind us that some places never forget, and some souls never truly leave. If tonight's journey through haunted barns sent shivers down your spine, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and join us for more explorations into haunted farms, abandoned structures, and the mysteries that linger just beyond the light. Keep your lanterns close, your senses alert, and your courage steady. Because in Iowa's haunted barns, the unseen forces are always watching. Stay brave, stay curious, and good night.